Hey guys, just a quick note before we begin that the show may contain spoilers and adult language, but that's just because we know how to have a good time. Stick around, you'll be glad you did.
You are here for me to enlighten you.
You ever act like this again, you're barred for life.
It's just violent bass.
It's kind of embarrassing.
If you know your lines, then you can forget them.
Oh, I get it. It's very clever.
Hello peoples and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the podcast where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me today is the man Kevin Spacey once referred to as a handsome-ass slab of baby back ribs, Mr. Ryan Siebold!
Bring on the barbecue sauce! What's up, Jason?
I always, at the time I assumed it was a reference like baby back ribs, like he thought there was something there.
I don't think there's anything there. But, it's a playable lie. I'll give you that one. Whatever.
What's going on over there in Tampa, Florida, good sir?
It's just me and Kevin Spacey, smooth hands, buddy. Things are going pretty well. Staying busy with work and doing these podcasts with you. Thanks for having me back again. You haven't fired me yet, so I must be doing something right.
Yeah, no, we actually did some audience research, and you've been polling like twice as well as I have. It's crazy. So now I have to keep you around because apparently I'm really unlikable, and people don't like the nasal quality of my voice. So,
man, did your wife tell you that?
She was one of the four people polled yes.
Yeah. I'll bet you pulled your wife.
So, anyways, it's that kind of show today.
It's weenie in the butt. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. Well, hey,
Jason.
What's up, dude? Hey,
we watched some movies.
We did watch a movie, dude. We watched a couple movies. Tell you what, though, before we get into that movie, and I know you're going to go ahead and kick us off here with a little description in a minute, did just want to take a minute to address to the listeners one of the reasons that we do this show. I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but I know a lot of the films that we look at are really films that you haven't seen. Maybe you haven't even heard of them. Ryan and I haven't seen a lot of these films either. And the reason that we specifically look at these lesser-known films, I mean, we're called Esoterica Cinema for a reason, and that's that people have made a lot of wonderful art over the years. And sometimes that art connects, and it becomes popular, and it persists throughout time, and it sells millions of copies. And other times there's really quality work, or maybe there's work where it's not perfect, but it has a lot to offer, and we just sort of disregard it because there's so much out there, right? We're just flooded with options. So what Ryan and I wanted to do with this program is give ourselves a chance to check out some of these films that we have maybe heard about, have a little bit of a reputation, but they're just not films that are part of the mainstream social consciousness, and then also expose those films to you, the listeners, and let you know, hey, this one, maybe it wasn't popular for a reason. It's okay. If you like it, if you like these types of films, just check it out. If you don't, you shouldn't. But then there's also some really wonderful films that we discover, and we bring them to you in hopes that you guys will like them just as much as we do, and you'll check it out and give it a shot. And who knows, maybe there's some films out there that nobody's watching that really deserve a sort of renaissance of their own, and recognition that just eluded them previously. And I think that maybe we've got a couple of those films here this week without going into too many spoilers. And so Ryan, why don't you go ahead and let the audience know what the film is we're going to be looking at and give us a brief description before we get into it.
All right. Well, we got a couple of winners today. I was pleasantly pleased with both these films. I expected to be, and I was. We're going to go ahead and start with Paths of Glory from 1957 by Stanley Kubrick. Paths of Glory is a 1957 American anti-war film, co-written and directed by Mr. Stanley Kubrick based on the novel of the same name by Humphrey Cobb. Set during World War I, the film stars Kirk Douglas as Colonel Dax, the commanding officer of French soldiers who refuse to continue a suicidal attack, after which Dax attempts to defend them against a charge of cowardice and a court-martial. So, yeah, this is interesting little film. I will say, Jason, that this was not the movie I thought I was setting out to watch. It was different. It's Kubrick, so I should have expected that. I don't know why I expected anything He always kind of takes traditional cinema and turns it on its ear, which is why we love him. And he did that with this in a kind of a smaller, more confined way, a little modest budget. And kudos to that guy. He crushed it. Had a bit of a solid career after this, I hear. That guy's going places.
Yeah, definitely. So I did have a trailer that I wanted to go ahead and play for the audience, just in case it's a film that any of you have not seen, or it's a film that it's been a while, you want a refresher. Let's go ahead and listen to the trailer for Paths of Glory.
Since the publication of the book 25 years ago, no one dared to make this movie. It was too shocking, too frank.
What sort of casualties do you anticipate, sir?
Say 5% killed by our own barrage. It's a very generous allowance. 10% more in getting through no man's land, and 20% more getting through the wire. That leaves 65%, with the worst part of the job over. Let's say another 25% in actually taking the anthill. We're still left with a force more than adequate to hold it.
General, you're saying that more than half of my men will be killed.
Aside from the inescapable fact that a good many of your men never left the trenches, there's the question of the troops' morale. Don't forget that.
The troops' morale, sir?
Certainly. These executions will be a perfect tonic for the entire division. There are few things more fundamentally encouraging and stimulating than seeing someone else die.
Where in heaven's name are they?
On the left.
Where on the left? 0+1 and they're still in the trenches. They're not advancing. Miserable cowards. They're not advancing. The barrage is getting away from them. They're still in the trenches. Captain Nichols.
Yes, sir?
Order the 75s to commence firing on our own positions.
All right, Ryan, so this is obviously an older film. There's actually a little bit of interesting history behind it, and we're going to throw some of those facts in here as well as we discuss. So, as we always do, we're going to start at the beginning. When this film starts, we open up on an exterior of this really extravagant, fancy-looking building. We quickly learn that it's in France. It's got a crisp, diligent military procession that's kind of going on. And we also really quickly see some of the elements that are going to become hallmarks of Kubrick's, right? So there's just, once you become familiar with his look and the visual language that he speaks, you start to see this across all of his different films, right? Whether it's the specific geometry that he utilizes. And so we see a lot of that with this sort of, like I said, military procession that's going on here. From there, we go inside the actual building. We see these two guys and they're talking. We don't really know who they are right off the bat, but they're obviously important military people. They're going back and forth, and one of them makes a request of the other to basically take over this impossible location on this battlefield. It's known as the Anthill. It's currently occupied by the Germans. The Moreau character is the one who the request is made to. And at first he kind of resists, but then his superior officer lets him know that there'll be a nice promotion in it for him, right? A little something to goose him along. And as it tends to do in these sort of movies, when you're looking at like the big bad authority figures, he's more than happy to do it if it's going to advance his own personal cause. And so from there, he's going to set into motion what's going to become the central conflict of the film, which is the attempt to overtake the Anthill, as well as the government's response to that. So, Ryan, what did you think about the way that, Kubrick shot that room? I mean, I thought it was, like I said, we sort of see a lot of what he would later be known for. Did you feel the same way about that?
Yeah, lots of cool camera movement, and there was just I thought the setting was really neat. I don't know where they shot it, soundstage or on location, but it had a lot of Lawrence of Arabia feel to it. Just the big, grandiose, It let you know these were some big time dudes, and they're playing chess with the world, and the rest of the movie kind of plays out accordingly within that little chess match. But they're conspiring, and a lot of beard stroking and mustache twirling going on here. But
Indubitably.
Right. Yeah. It's lots of little,
they definitely have, high backed chairs that they're sitting in that are some exotic fabric there.
Yeah, I thought the establishing shot, and then like you said, all the camera movement and stuff, it felt like Play School is my first Kubrick movie, and I really enjoyed it.
Definitely. Yeah, and the actors also did a really good job of sort of exploring the environment right off the bat. In addition to, because Kubrick's sort of known for his wide shots and his slow tracking shots, and so there's a lot of people that may consider his visual language kind of on the dull or boring side. And so I think that for those types of people, because look, let's remember, this was a major studio release. This wasn't like a small indie film. I mean, this was, an MGM picture, whoever released it, one of the bigs, and it's a Kirk Douglas starring vehicle. And so he has an audience to please, and I think that he was young enough in his career that he wasn't quite as stubborn in his sort of know-it-allness with regard to his approach and his style. And he's definitely one of those people where you have to take the good with the bad in terms of the way that he approaches filmmaking, and some of the more unfortunate stories, like how he treated Shelley Duvall when he was filming The Shining, things like that. But I think that here, he's young enough and he doesn't have that reputation and that power yet, so he still gets to play ball a little bit, and I think it ultimately does work to the film's benefit.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a little back and forth, and a lot of setup, and here in this first scene, and then we kind of get right into it, and we end up right on the battlefield, and we start to the two generals or what have you make plans basically to take the anthill, like you were saying, and then we get to the anthill, and the poor military souls that were going to be used to try to take this untakeable thing, and eventually that's when we get down to brass tacks and meet Kirk Douglas, and that gets introduced to us.
Yeah, and that's right before the actual storming of the anthill. So, like, right before then, we have that scene where Moreau is going through the trenches, and I mean, you got to just figure, too, that, like, Kubrick was just licking his chops at the idea of photographing in some tight corridor of a trench, man. I mean, like, those tracking shots,
right?
Those tracking shots, and with his love of, geometry and symmetry, those tracking shots, whether it's, just the empty sort of trench and the soldiers hanging out on the side and it's a little bit, smoky and ethereal, or, whether he's watching Kirk Douglas march down the middle of the trench itself, check his watch all badass style while bombs are just blowing up behind him. I mean, that dude loves himself some tracking shots, especially within tight quarters. So this is like the precursor to The Shining, right? That would come 20 years later. It's basically the hallway shot, but in black and white in the middle of a trench.
Yep. Or even, there's a little bit of that in 2001, and
yep.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of his MO, and he gives it to you here in a very, very cool, raw, way. There's even a little wink and a nod in some of Deacon's shots in 1917, I thought, when I was watching it, I was kind of like, oh, a little 1917 stuff going on here. It's pretty fun.
I still haven't seen that film.
What?
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a feat of strength. It is what it is, but Jesus, how they made that movie is bananas. Jason, do you think they used dollies for those leading shots and tracking shots, or you think they were handheld with this, or
no way it was handheld, dude. Yeah, no, it had to be on a dolly with steady, because that we're talking what, 50s?
I thought I saw dolly tracks. That's why I was asking.
Well, so I don't know that it could be tracks, because there was a lot of the shots where we saw the ground before us. You know what I mean? So I suppose they could have filmed it in a certain way.
I was trying to figure it out.
It seemed
I was trying to get to the bottom of that Scooby-Doo mystery.
Yeah, but I just think at the time there was no way. Dude, have you ever gone back and watched a film from the 30s and 40s and just seen them try to do like a simple dolly left or dolly right? Like, it feels like you're off-roading on a goddamn mountain with, like, all sorts of giant boulders, dude, and they're just, like, moving the camera over a few feet to the right. Like, Steadicam technology and all of that was not what it was back then. And we get some really, really great, really smooth tracking shots.
Yeah, but they had dolly tracks back then. They probably started with dolly tracks. They didn't go just, like, jump right into doorway dollies in a dirt trench, did they, for this shot?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'd be curious.
I would be too. If any of our listeners know, feel free to hit us up, and this will be a good I know more than you do moment for you. You can email and school us at esotericacinema@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at esotericacinema.
Shameless self-promotion.
Let us know that we're a bunch of idiots, and here's what's up. So anyways, Ryan, let's get back to the film. So if you remember, this guy Moreau, he's going through, and look, one thing we also need to acknowledge is that this is a satire of war films, right? And so there's a lot of making the authority and establishment figures out to seem either foolish or ill in their aims, whatever that is. So I think right off the bat, this Moreau guy's kind of made to look like a fool because he's just walking through and he just stops like every, 7th to 12th soldier. And he's like, hey, you, are you ready to kill more Germans? And he's like, yes, sir. And they're like, yeah, very good. And then they like take 5 more paces and he's like, you there, are you ready to kill more Germans? And he's like, yes, sir. Ha, that's what I love to hear. And it's like, oh, okay, so you're like the shitty floor manager or owner that like does nothing for the business and just kind of asks people like, hey, you good? Hey, you good? Which is funny because I don't know if you're watching season 3 of Miss Maisel at all, but there's a funny scene that is exactly that moment in there. You ever catch that show?
No, I really actually really do enjoy that show, but I haven't gotten into season 3 yet.
It's very charming. I do enjoy it. She's great. But anyway, and
to your point, a lot of the soldiers he's asking actually are not good at all. And they tell him such. They're like, yeah, bro, I'm not good, dude. And he's like, suck it up. And he's like, I'm missing an arm. It's not very good. He's like, you'll be fine.
Well, yeah, no, dude, there's the guy who's literally suffering from like shell shock and PTSD. And he like talks to him and they're like, oh yeah, no, he's shell shocked. And he's like, what? You're a pussy. There's no such thing as shell shock. Get the hell out of my infantry. And it's like, oh my God, this guy's a piece of work. Like, man.
Yeah. So it kind of lets you know that he ain't taking no for an answer. He's going for a promotion basically and a commendation or whatever it is. And
yeah.
So if he takes the anthill, he gets it. And so now he wasn't that interested in sacrificing his men and taking all the bad rap for it. But once he had that little carrot on the stick, he was all about it. So here we go, down in the trenches. And we meet our cast that we're going to be with for most of the rest of the film in this trench, including some different military personnel. We do meet Kirk Douglas here, but not until a little bit down the trench. We meet a few people prior.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I love is when we do meet Colonel Dax, who is the name of the character played by Kirk Douglas, like he gets what I have to imagine would have been like the sexy leading actor shirtless shot today. Like it's done by like Chris Pratt, today. But back then it was, Mr. Kirk Douglas. And it's like awesome because not only does he have the washboard abs, but he's got those really high-waisted pants that they all wore back then. They go like right up to the rib cage to where you almost can't even see the abs. And you've just got to imagine that, all those suburban housewives, as the political demographics like to identify them, they must have gotten down.
Kirk Douglas and mom jeans, no belly button. Kirk Douglas, just straight to the ribs.
Yeah, I'll bet you Kevin Spacey would have thought he was a sexy slab of baby back ribs too.
Kirk Douglas is so manly; he's got hips on his ribs, and we saw them. He's a barrel-chested dude too. He was a scrappy man back then. I think this is after. I think this was made after 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, if I'm not mistaken. And I really enjoy that movie. But
really?
He was a strapping young barrel-chested man in that one as well. But
Ryan,
opposite Peter Lorre, I guess.
Ryan, this is a good time. I gotta admit something to you, buddy. And it's not easy, but just gonna throw it out there. This is the first film I have ever seen starring one Mr. Kirk Douglas.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah. No, dude. I mean, I know all about him, and I avoid his shitty Sons movies like The Plague, but I really enjoyed him in this, and I definitely want to see some more Kirk Douglas. And not only that, but the thing that you got to remember too is I know Kirk Douglas as, what's his name, Chester, the old man from The Simpsons who made the actual Itchy and Scratchy. That's what I know him from, okay? When you say Kirk Douglas, you've probably got some prolific film he did, like in his 20s or 30s, whenever he was. Yeah, for me, old hobo from The Simpsons, Kirk Douglas's best character by far.
That's fantastic.
Hey, before we continue real quick, so it's actually in this scene that Moreau confronts him, and he orders him to take the anthill. And of course, Colonel Dax being like the one sympathetic, leader in this entire movie, expresses that that's not going to be so easy, and he's dubious and skeptical. I do have a clip of that, and we're going to go ahead and play it here real quick for some of our listeners, and we're going to be right back to talk about it.
What sort of casualties do you anticipate, sir?
Say 5% killed by our own barrage. It's a very generous allowance. 10% more in getting through no man's land, and 20% more getting to the wire. That leaves 65%, with the worst part of the job over. Let's say another 25% in actually taking the anthill. We're still left with a force more than adequate to hold it.
General, you're saying that more than half my men will be killed.
Yes, it's a terrible price to pay, Colonel. But we will have the anthill.
But will we, sir?
I'm depending on you, Colonel. All France is depending on you. Am I amusing you, Colonel?
Not a bull, General. I don't need a flag waved in front of me to get me to charge.
I don't think I like your comparison of the flag of France to a bullfighter's cape.
I meant nothing disrespectful to the flag of France, sir.
Patriotism may be old-fashioned, but show me a patriot and I'll show you an honest man.
Well, not everyone has always thought so. Samuel Johnson had something else to say about patriot.
And what was that, may I ask?
Well, nothing really.
What do you mean, nothing really?
Well, sir, nothing really important.
Colonel, when I ask a question, it's always important. Now, who is this man?
Samuel Johnson, sir.
All right, now what did he have to say about patriotism?
He said it was the last refuge of the scoundrels, sir. I'm sorry, I meant nothing personal.
You're tired, Dax. You're very tired. It's you who are exhausted, not your men. And it's my fault. I've given you one impossible task after another. You need rest. You need it badly. And you never would either. Therefore, you're not going to have any say-so about it, Colonel. As from right now, I'm ordering you on indefinite furlough.
General, you can't take me away from my men. You can't do that to me, sir.
Not to you, Dax. For you. For your good and for the good of your men.
The good of my men, sir.
If a commanding officer lacks confidence, what can we expect of his men? Naturally, I don't want to relieve you, but I must have your enthusiastic support. Not once have you said that your men can take the anthill.
We'll take the anthill. If any soldiers in the world can take it, we'll take the anthill.
Okay, by the way, Ryan, before we continue, I don't know if this is just me. I literally thought this as I was watching it. I have it in my notes, which is that Moreau sounds exactly like white Keith David. Am I the only one? Is this just me? I mean, it's Keith. I mean, the rhythms and the tonality of his voice, like, that's Keith David, just as a white British dude. Like, it's hard to explain, but like, it's one of the, once you hear it, you can't unhear it, man. I'm telling you.
Well, these are the kind of things we're cracking down on here on this podcast. Esoterica Cinema is what sets us apart. We're finding who's Keith David, who's not. We got to get to the bottom of these things. This is what the listeners want to know. They need to know. Is this...
Dude, there's going to be a bar trivia night, and one of the questions is going to be like, which actor sounds like white Keith David? And you're going to be like, oh, I know this one. You're welcome, people.
But I don't.
You're welcome.
I don't.
I don't know his name either. I just hope someone looked it up.
He's so close, yet so far away. I'm no good. No help.
The interesting thing, though, kind of dovetailing from that a little bit, is that I did think that it was kind of interesting to note how the performances themselves, maybe not so much Kirk Douglas, but all the other performances seemed really theatrical and very over the top. I don't know if you felt the same way.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and so it was interesting to see how that contrasted what was actually some pretty realistic filming in terms of the cinematography and the direction. It looks like the production design at the time must have been stellar because it didn't look bad. It looked totally passable these days, and it's, 70-something years later, whatever?
Well, I thought that it was the whole overall production was boosted at this point in the film by the sound design because if you took away the explosions and the occasional bullets and gunfire and things that were happening in the background, it did kind of feel like they were on a soundstage or a set or something like that when they were in their little. When they were in the trenches or in the holes and stuff like that. So I feel like the sound design, once we got to this stage in the film, really did a lot to bolster kind of where we were at until we went out onto the battlefield, and then then shit got real.
Yeah.
And the size of the cast, all the soldiers that he got to run out, and it just felt like a very full film. Like I don't know. I really. I had a lot of fun going through this, and I thought this is what going back to my earlier point, I thought this was what the film was going to be. I thought this is what we were in store for, and it's actually only really the first act, I think. Right? Would you agree?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I might even take it a step further and say it's pretty much just the one scene where they try to rush the anthill and it just goes horribly awry. Because the only other scene would be the scene before that, which is the one that takes place at night, where there's like the lieutenant, I think he is, and he's the drunkard, and he's got the two other guys, and they have to go on like a night patrol mission, and they get to this place where there's like the downed helicopter or plane, and then the one guy goes to investigate, and the drunkard lieutenant guy gets all flustered and ends up chucking a grenade because he's got the willies or whatever, and then later we get what I thought was a really cool way of revealing that, which is the bombs that are dropping from the sky light up the battlefield, and then we see the soldier's dead body from the explosion of the grenade, knowing that he ended up killing one of his own soldiers. And so I thought that was really well done from a visual standpoint, as well as, to your point,
absolutely,
an audio standpoint. And I think both of those things work in concert very well. To your point, this is a smaller film, but because of the way that they do utilize the audio and video and the way that Kubrick frames his shots, it feels much larger than it is. Because, yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that surprised both of us, is how small a film this ultimately really is. There's a lot of, 2 and 3 person dialogue driven scenes. The quote unquote action scene is really very short, not too much action. And so it was definitely, like you say, the idea of someone turning the war film on their head and that person being Kubrick is not exactly a stretch. I mean, this is a guy who's tried to, divert every single genre trope. Like, I mean, that guy has literally made every single genre of film that's out there, right? He's made his sci-fi in 2001. He's made several war films. He's made his horror film with The Shining. You could argue he made a romance with Lolita. I mean, these are, he literally just check,
Absolutely. And he even kind of somewhat left us with AI, which controversially true. I enjoyed.
I really enjoyed that movie, dude. Interestingly enough, it's have you watched it in the last, 7 years, 10 years?
Yeah, probably about that long.
Yeah. So when I was younger, like when that film, because I mean, dude, I think we were in late high school when that film came out, and
something like that. I was a little older than that, but yeah.
Yeah, I remember like violently.
I got you by a couple years, buddy.
Yeah, that's true. I always forget that. But I mean, I defended the hell out of that film, and there was a lot of people. I don't know why, but a lot of people were like really upset by the film. Like, it's one thing if you think that film's okay, but there were people that like passionately disliked that film. I don't know if part of that too was, I mean, if you're going to take two diametrically opposed figures from an emotional standpoint, you couldn't really do much better than Spielberg and Kubrick, right? I mean, everything Spielberg does is warmth and heart and humanity, and everything Kubrick does is cold and logic, and, man is a beast. And so I think that for maybe some people, it was hard to reconcile that juxtaposition because there was just different elements at play with the way that they approached it. Does that make sense?
Is an odd one.
Yeah.
No, it definitely does. It definitely does. I mean, I was trying to rack my brain as you were describing that and think of two other directors that would be opposed to each other in that regard, that would make each other's films and still be able to do something of quality. I don't know. I couldn't think of anything, but
it'd be like if the Safdie brothers got together with Wes Anderson.
Or like if Chris Columbus made a Paul Thomas Anderson script. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of odd.
Yeah, definitely, right?
You'd have like Mark Wahlberg doing Lines of Blow to like a John Williams score. That'd be fucking awesome, actually. I want this to happen.
I think that was actually the director's cut of Training Day. You didn't catch the director's cut?
That was cool, yeah. I love that John Williams score.
Yeah, man. So anyways, like I said, let's get back to the film here. We've got the next morning. It's after this failed attack. Complete abject failure, as everybody expected except for Moreau himself. No progress was made. Many lives were lost. And the one thing that we didn't mention either, Ryan, is there's that whole thing where when the offensive is going on, when France is trying to attack the anthill and take Germany's position, there's that whole scene where Moreau orders his own squad to fire on his own people. And if you remember, he gets on the phone and he's literally calling in the order, but then there's the he's like, I think he's like the artillery commander or something like that, and he's like, yeah, no, not gonna happen, bro. You need to get a written affidavit. He's like, screw you, you've got to do it. I'm your superior. So I just like, nah, not happening, right, bro. Gotta have a letter.
Trying to pull rank on everybody.
Yeah.
I'm gonna slow you down and actually go back a little bit, because there's something that happens even before this, the night before. So Dax comes in, he pulls in all his high-ranking homies and rounds the troops, and he explains to them, you know, basically, we're going to take this anthill tomorrow. We've been ordered to do this thing. We're going to do the impossible. Get some rest, and bright and early, you know. And then they're asking what the weather is going to be like, and he's like, well, it's going to be sunny and beautiful. And so we have no cover. We have nothing going for us. We're up against everything. It's going to suck. Most of us are going to die, but we've been ordered to do this, and so we got to go do it and do the best we can. And then we go to the bunks of two of our soldiers that we're with the rest of the film, whose name elude me at the moment. I should know that. I don't. I apologize. But they have a little bunk bed discussion. And to me, this discussion is kind of what this movie is about. And I wanted to bring this up because I was curious on your opinions. But basically, they discuss how they want to die, or what dying is to them, and what really scares them more, the death or the pain, and all of these existential things that might cross your mind if you're heading towards your sudden doom the next day with some of your, you know, brothers in arms. And so I just kind of felt like that. I wrote in my notes, you know, this movie kind of gets summed up with how do you want to die? And we follow that throughout the rest of the film. I know it's an anti-war film. I know it, you know, makes statements about bureaucracy and leadership and the red tape that gets in the way of human life, et cetera, things we're seeing in our own government in our own country to this day. But it's also to me about how do you want to die, and what scares you about death, or what do you embrace about it, and so on. And I really thought that was very profound, that you know, little off the cuff discussion that you could have just passed right over. I thought, you know, I really enjoyed that little diatribe that they went on.
Yeah, well, and it brings up an interesting point, because I think that, if I remember correctly, this is the same scene where at least one of the men talks about how people aren't really afraid of dying. They're afraid of specifically dying in pain, and that it's not the death they're afraid of, it's the pain that they're afraid of. And I thought that was a really salient point. That is something that it kind of makes sense when you stop and think about it, but it's not maybe something, for me, it's not something that I had always necessarily considered. But the more you think about it, like, the more that seems true. You know, people don't, as long as they can go out, you know, painless, easy, you know, then it carries a lot less of that sting. So I can't say I disagree with it. I don't have anything to add to it. It was just kind of a point where I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't consider that, but he's absolutely right.
Yeah, I just wanted to unwind a minute and talk about that scene because that one really spoke to me. I thought that was, we're in the middle of war and there's a lot of stuff going on. And they're throwing stuff at you pretty fast at this point because we're, everything's escalating and ramping up. They're building tension. And then we kind of stop for a minute and we go to these soldiers in their bunks and we get to see what's kind of going on in their head as they're facing sudden doom. And I just thought that was really, I always love it when movies kind of get in the heads of your characters that are about to go through a psychological scarring or emotional scarring experience and kind of let you, kind of roll around in it for a little while. And he did, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, totally agree, man. It really allows you to appreciate where the characters are coming from. As a filmmaker, it gives you the opportunity to explore some of the different reactions, so you have different characters with different personalities reacting in different ways to the events that are transpiring before and around them. And so it really gives you something to explore. Yeah, I absolutely understand that. So
yeah, then we get to the next day. They wake up and we're storming the anthill. Shit's going awry, and we get to what you were talking about, where Kirk Douglas's crew, gets out of the trenches and starts going across the wire. They get across the dead zone, and then they start getting pinned down really bad. And he realizes that all the men did not get out of the trenches because once the Germans realized what the fuck was going on, they pinned down everybody. They had them, dead to rights. And so some of the men got out, and they're being held down in the dead zone. A lot of men are getting killed, and he realizes that he has no reinforcement. So he runs back to go try to get those men out. And they're like, fuck that. We can't get out of here. We're pinned down. And he realizes they're not able to leave. And so, he's kind of being held down himself at this moment. And that is when, to your point, which you were talking about, where the general was firing on his own men to try to push them out, more or less, saying, you think it's bad out there. I'm about to shoot some mortars in your trenches. So you might as well get out there, folks. So, and that didn't go over well. Nobody allowed him to do that, right?
Correct. Yeah. And that ends up coming back to bite him in the ass later as well. So the next day after the plan goes awry, we learn that Moreau is determined to court-martial 100 of the men for cowardice in the face of war. And this would later be negotiated down to just 3. One from each company. And immediately Colonel Dax, being the honorable guy that he is, offers to defend the men. He mentions the fact that he was like a criminal lawyer back in his civilian life or whatever. And so he takes up that mantle and defends them in what we quickly learn is not going to be a fair trial whatsoever. Right off the bat, he's stonewalled every step of the way, and we get this big blowhard speech from the prosecutor about making sure to convict, blah, blah, blah. And then immediately after that, Dax gets up and gives something of a rousing speech of his own with some awesome photography and some awesome tracking that, while we're not able to show you, you can imagine as we play you this clip from Paths of Glory.
Gentlemen of the court, there are times when I'm ashamed to be a member of the human race, and this is one such occasion. It's impossible for me to summarize the case for the defense since the court never allowed me a reasonable opportunity to present my case.
Are you protesting the authenticity of this court?
Yes, sir. I protest against being prevented from introducing evidence that I consider vital to the defense. The prosecution presented no witnesses. There has never been a written indictment of charges made against defendants. And lastly, I protest against the fact that no stenographic records of this trial have been kept. The attack yesterday morning is no statement of the honor of France. And certainly no disgrace to the fighting men of this nation. But this court-martial is such a statement and such a disgrace. The case made against these men is a mockery of all human justice. Gentlemen of the court, to find these men guilty would be a crime. to haunt each of you to the day you die. I can't believe that the noblest impulse in man, his compassion for another, can be completely dead here. Therefore, I humbly beg you, show mercy to these men.
So that's a great speech, Ryan. Kirk is still bringing that fire, and regardless, entirely ineffective, as all three men are sentenced to death in what is clearly a kangaroo court. And that night, Kirk Douglas, Dax...
Well, it should be mentioned he's in court without a shirt on, still wearing the mom jeans, so hard to take him seriously as a judge. You know, he's pleading his case, he's doing his, best Tom Cruise, A Few Good Men, laying it down. Man, put a shirt on, throw a tie, have some respect. Court.
I really don't remember that, but interesting. I might have to go back and rewatch it. Just feel like that was probably central to the scene.
This is kind of where the movie shifts gears, and this is what we were talking about earlier. Where I thought I was watching a war movie, war as hell, all gritty, blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden now, just like I said, we're almost in A Few Good Men. Like this all turns into a courtroom drama where lives are in the balance of our three soldiers, and for cowardice, and you have these generals still playing. Man, these generals are some smug motherfuckers. All this courtroom scene, dude, they're all sitting there stroking their beards. They're like, yeah, what you say is true, but it's like, man, you smug motherfucker.
It's definitely a commentary on that whole aristocracy and authority. And I mean, look, dude, like filmmakers are just naturally the type to rebel against authority, right? Like, so
right. Yeah. Well, especially Kubrick. Yeah.
Yeah. So it makes sense that, rarely do we see this movie where the protagonist is like, hey guys, we really need to listen to our superiors. Okay. Authority knows much better than we do. And we should all just take a step back and respect said authority and follow their lead. I've missed a lot of those types of films, right? Maybe you've seen
that. Would have been an awesome courtroom speech. We should go make that movie.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, everything they said is 100% right. The movie is over. Thank you.
Bureaucracy exists for a reason.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But I mean, it also doesn't it's not a courtroom drama in the sense that we do get that one scene, but it's really, the whole courtroom scene is one long scene. We don't go back there. It's about 10, 15 minutes maybe. And then it's over. They get sentenced to death. And then that night we see Colonel Dax go to, I think his name's Brulard. He's like the president, and he basically tells him about Moreau's orders to fire on his own men and how he brought these sworn statements from various soldiers that were there that witnessed the event. And, we're not exactly sure if that's going to turn anything or not right off the bat, but honestly, what I thought was going to happen, because the president physically takes the orders, this Brulard guy physically takes the statements and bails. And I thought he was just going to be doing one of those things like, Kirk Douglas is going to bring it up later. Hey, let me see those statements. He's just going to be like, oh, what statements? I don't know what you're talking about. What statements? I thought that's what he was going to do. And he was going to try to bury the evidence and make Moreau look better. That's not what ends up happening.
These guys are all leveraging things to make themselves better and advance their career, any chance they get. And
yes.
In this scene, Kirk Douglas kind of proposed to him a way that he could use this. It's like, what are you going to do? There's two ways this is going to go down. You're either going to let this leak and then you're going to look like you sided with this guy, or you can be on the right side of history, help me out, and you're going to look like a hero. And he's like, a hero, eh? And so he took the notes and, he bailed back to his little party that Kirk Douglas had pulled him out of. Yeah. By the way, Kirk Douglas still not wearing a shirt.
Well, the other thing that they mentioned too is the Brulard character. He talks about one of the reasons that he doesn't want to do it is because they use executions to help maintain a sense of law and order among the people.
Right. Yeah, he wanted to make examples out of these people to help fill the men with vim and vigor and blah, blah, blah.
Correct. And then from there, we do get a nice scene with the prisoners that's a little more of what you touched on earlier in terms of, getting those moments and those inner workings of some of the ancillary characters' psychologies. So we're in with the prisoners, and they're inside, and, you know, it's where the priest has come to basically give them their last rites. What did you think of that scene, Ryan?
I love that you said we deal with the ancillary characters' psychologies. I wrote, Esoterica Cinema has me deal with some heavy ass shit, bro. That's in my notes right here. So I need to read more. Apparently, that's the first thing I'm learning today. Yeah, I loved all of this. I thought that it was, you know, a really, I mean, it was a bummer. It was a little, you know, it was a pretty sad scene watching these three men deal with death. Here we are again. This kind of comes full circle with what I was saying earlier about how do you want to die. We started off with these men in the bunker dealing with going into battle, and they thought they were going to die like that. Now they know how they're going to die, and it's actually going to be quick and hopefully painless. And yet still, they're not too keen on it. They they didn't change their minds about death by swapping out how they were going to die. So. And they deal with it in different ways. And of course, a preacher comes in, a religious person to absolve them of their sins and let them make peace with God if they want. And each of the three men kind of deal with this whole thing in a different way. One of which gets knocked the F out, and he's kind of done for the rest of the movie, and he's my favorite. He's my absolute favorite.
I loved him as well.
I don't want to spoil anything. We'll get
What
there.
are you talking about? Our entire program is one giant spoiler. That's literally what we do.
I don't want to jump
on
right
the
to
show, bro.
I don't want to jump to the end. Okay, well, I mean, when they line him up, man, and he's been knocked out for fucking, I don't know, probably 24 hours or 12 hours. I mean, it was a long time he's been out cold. And they bring him out to the firing squad on a gurney. They carry his ass out there. They prop the gurney up and they tie the gurney to the pole with the rest of them, with the other guys. And then they pinch his cheek to wake him up. They're like, hey, you're going to die now. I fucking love that shit. That was so brilliant.
Yeah. So that actually brings up a really interesting fact that I had read about. You know, we don't really do too much research in terms of trying to figure out the film, but every now and then you'll come across a fact when we're doing our summaries and things like that. And I had actually read a story. So as I mentioned earlier, this was a major studio release for Kubrick. It was earlier in his career, so he didn't have the confidence that he would have later in his career. And so he actually was willing to make a concession for the studio that I can't imagine he would have been willing to make later on in his life at all. And that's that even though, because this was based on a book, I don't believe we mentioned that. And even though in the book...
I did, in my summary.
Oh, you did. Good. Awesome. Well, I need to listen to you more, buddy. My wife tells me the same thing for what it's worth.
You really do. Yeah.
But yeah, so in the book, they get executed, and the studio, of course, because studio execs always want the happy ending, was like, hey, do you think we could do something about those guys dying? And Kubrick actually relented. And Kubrick said, yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll rewrite it so that those three guys survive. And they're saved at the last minute by one reason or another. And they actually went and reshot, like they rewrote it, and then they either started or finished reshooting. And then Kirk Douglas found out. And of course, he was shirtless at the time, so he walks up to Stanley and he's like, hey, Kubrick, what the hell? I heard you redid this scene and not gonna fly. You need to change it back to the way it was written because that actually says something and has meaning behind it. And so Kirk Douglas made Stanley Kubrick change it back to the way that it was. And he's probably just like some little kid in between mom and dad, like, I don't know, they're fighting. Dad tells me to do this and mom tells me to do this. I'm just trying to make everyone happy.
I mean, little known fact, Kirk Douglas has nipple rings, and it's kind of intimidating.
He was actually the first to get nipple rings, like not even to popularize it, but he was literally the first person because at the time everyone thought it was crazy. They're like, Kirk Douglas, you can't possibly pierce your nipples. And then he would give them that look, you know, with his really clenched jaw. And they were like, actually, you know what? Nipple rings sound like a really good idea, Mr. Douglas. Can I attach them for you? And that's how nipple rings were born.
Well, See, this is why you tune into this podcast, everybody. You got to know.
Dropping knowledge on the people, man.
Derek Piercings.
Yeah, you got to know that Kirk Douglas had washboard abs, high-waisted jeans, and also started nipple rings. These are facts, people.
Yep. So if you're out there and you're masturbating right now and you're almost to climax, we'll get you there. Just stick with us. We're getting to it.
Can you do like a sexy Kirk Douglas for like any of the ladies or gentlemen? We don't discriminate.
I wish I could do a good Kirk Douglas impression. It would quickly turn into a Charlton Heston impression. And no one needs that.
I was thinking of a Kirk Douglas impression in my head, and it just came out Charlton Heston. It was like, "Hello, girls, how are you doing today?"
Yeah, damn dirty apes, and then it just goes downhill from there. My cold dead hands, and it's like, Jesus, that's not Kirk Douglas.
So, anyways, after the execution, Ryan.
Right, yeah. Sorry.
So anyways, but seriously, after the execution, so Dax is dining with Moreau and the Brulard guy, and that's when Brulard basically calls out Moreau. He's like, "Oh, look at these little affidavits I got here," fanning him around a little bit, and Moreau's like, "What? Like, I don't know what that is. This is preposterous." And so, he leaves. And
that's a terrific impression of this entire movie.
So he leaves, he's all offended, and then Brulard offers Dax the job, Moreau's old job. And, Dax literally tells him to go to hell. And Brulard's really surprised because he assumed that this whole thing was a bit of gamesmanship on behalf of Dax so that he could make a play for his job. And I actually have a clip for that we're going to play here real quick, Ryan. It's Mr. Douglas bringing that heat. Let's listen.
Colonel Dax, how would you like General Miro's job?
His what, sir?
His job.
Let me get this straight, sir. You're offering me General Miro's command?
Come, Colonel Dax, don't overdo the surprise. You've been after the job from the start. We all know that, my boy.
I may be many things, sir, but I'm not your boy.
Well, I certainly didn't mean to imply any biological relationship.
I'm not your boy in any sense.
You're trying to provoke me, Colonel?
Well, why should I want to do that?
Exactly. It would be a pity to lose your promotion before you get it. A promotion you have so very carefully planned for.
Sir, would you like me to suggest what you can do with that promotion?
Colonel Dax! You will apologize at once or I shall be placed under arrest.
I apologize for not being entirely honest with you. I apologize for not revealing my true feelings. I apologize, sir, for not telling you sooner that you're a degenerate, sadistic old man. And you can go to hell before I apologize to you now or ever again.
Colonel Dax, you're a disappointment to me. You have spoiled the keenness of your mind by wallowing in sentimentality. You really did want to save those men. And you were not angling for Miro's command. You're an idealist. And I pity you, as I would the village idiot. We're fighting a war, Dax, a war that we've got to win. Those men didn't fight, so they were shot. You bring charges against General Miro, so I insist that he answer them. Wherein have I done wrong?
And Ryan, I think this illustrates one of the great things about the Dax character, which is that, look, dude, you and I are some cynical-ass cats, dude. For sure. Like, no doubt about that. But that being said, it's always nice to have just a really genuine, good-hearted character that cuts through the bullshit. And he's literally the only person in this entire movie who has a position of authority, who's like not cynical, and who hasn't just given up on the idea of leadership and what it means to be a leader and what it means to command men and take them into battle. Dax is purely honorable with regard to the fact that he only wants to do well for and by himself and his men in the name of his country, and he's caught up in all of this political bullshit and all of these people who are just trying to advance their career, and they'll happily sacrifice the needs of the many for the needs of the few. And so there's that built-in admiration that we have for the Dax character, and it only gets reinforced when you listen to something like that. He literally tells him to go to hell. And so I loved the Dax character. Obviously, him being the only honorable one amongst all of this, it makes it a little bit easier for us to connect with him in that regard. But and then from there, we get the final scene, which is a really, really interesting scene, Ryan. And I'm actually going to let you go ahead and take this one and set it up for us and let us know kind of what you thought about everything.
Yeah, it was an emotional turn where we saw the softer side of war, I guess, but then also, so after all that goes down, Kirk Douglas is wandering the barracks or the base, and ends up in a little pub, if you will. Is this the scene you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so he gets in there, and almost like carnival barker comes out. Step right up. Let me show you what I got.
Yeah,
and he starts presenting this beautiful German woman, who, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but is played by Stanley Kubrick's wife.
Oh.
Of his entire life, like his wife.
Wow.
That
No
stuck
clue.
with him the entire way through his death. And so beautiful woman, and
lovely.
He wheels her on out there and says, "You gotta hear her sing, ladies and gentlemen. She's got a voice like an angel," and introduces her. And all the soldiers are here, and they're all whistling and oh, shake it and blah blah blah. And it's turned into a little risque USO show, if you will. But only this awkward captive Russian or a German woman on stage, unwillingly. And finally she starts singing and touches all the soldiers emotionally. They all start to get choked up and start to sing with her or hum along with her. They know the tune. And it was a weird turning of the tides because, in just a moment of her singing, they turned from, whistling chauvinists and catcalling and all of these things to they start to get, a little choked up, and maybe they see a piece of their mother in her or something like that. But, it's almost like the Lost Boys when Wendy's singing to the Lost Boys in Peter Pan, and they all start to, they were all tough and rough against Captain Hook, and then now they're all, soft and going to bed. So,
wow.
soldiers,
I just heard Your Mother and Mine
get a
in
little...
my head. That's crazy. I haven't thought about that song in like 20 years, man. That's nuts.
Well, you're welcome. And so, yeah, they get a little choked up, they get a little teary-eyed, and then Michael Douglas is like, back to fucking work, bro. And he leaves the bar, and he goes storming back. So, and that's kind of how the movie ends.
Yeah. And I did actually think that was a rather resonant moment. And I think that what was going on there is, I think that, because you're right, they couldn't sing along with her because she's singing in German and they're French and they don't speak German. But what they start to do is they start to hum the melody of the song that she's singing. And so, within a very brief period of time, suddenly they're all humming this melody that this German girl's singing, and there becomes a connection between them because, at first she's, understandably got tears rolling down her cheeks as they're just kind of, like you say, hooting and hollering and, hey, take it off, baby, blah, 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 whatever, stupid shit people do. And very quickly, and I think that it was her honest and raw emotions kind of coming through that song that reminded them that, like, oh yeah, this isn't like a strip club. This is a girl that is in the middle of a war. She's a prisoner of war. And there was something about that moment and that song that made them remember that. The other thing too is that Dax is going back to the bar to tell the soldiers that they have to go back to war, that they're going to have to go back to the front, and they're going to have to go make another charge, and they're probably all going to die as it is. And so I think that when you understand that and couple it with the fact that, she's, again, been taken hostage, and it was just sort of this connection of like, oh, yeah, we're all taken hostage. All of us are hostage to the whims and desires of these people with much more authority and power than we have, and whatever the situation, we're all basically being held captive. We're all prisoners of war in our own regard as it relates to us specifically. And so I think that they bond over that. And Dax knows.
Yeah, that's heavy shit.
Yeah, and Dax knows, and I think he just it's a lot for him too, and he knows that, these kids and these men have been put in a shit position, and he just can't bring himself to interrupt the moment. And so he's just like, you know what, fuck it, man, I'm out of here. He bails. So, great film, man. I really enjoyed it. To your point, I thought I was getting a more traditional war film. I thought I was in for like Stanley Kubrick's Platoon, basically, right? But we didn't get that.
Should have known better. I know, yeah. Should have known better, though.
Yeah, we got a much better film. I mean, I don't know how you feel about Platoon. I think it's ridiculous and overwrought and melodramatic and just absurd. But this is not that film. This is a really sobering and poignant look at war. And I'll tell you what, Ryan, why don't you go ahead? Because, we always wrap up each program with our 3 adjectives as well as our star rating. Why don't you give us your 3 adjectives for this film?
I started off with gritty because it's very gritty. And with the budget and the scope of the film being what it was, I know it was a studio film, but it was, kind of a smaller picture. And definitely, what he wasn't playing with 2001 technology at that point. So it was pretty gritty, and you're down in the trenches and shit's going down, and it's also very promising because I think it shows. You said this many, many times throughout this episode where it shows us a lot of what Kubrick was about to drop on us, and this is kind of the film to me where I really kind of saw a lot of because right after this he makes Spartacus, and then he goes right into I think to do Doctor Strangelove and a couple others, 2001's right after that, I think. So there's a lot of really, really good shit that he's about to drop on us right after this movie. Mm-hmm. The next one with Kirk Douglas, no less. And war is hell. I know that's not a word, but damn it. I mean, the bureaucracy of it all, people suck, leadership and he made a pretty strong argument for not liking authority. I have to really agree with him. War is hell, gritty, promising.
Excellent. Yeah, dude, those are great. For me, so my first one is that it's a powerful film. I think that it's one of these films, and look, not just powerful like in the way that like critically like, oh my God, it's powerful, but it's powerful in the way that it says so much through so little. Like a lot of films, they kind of have disposable scenes, disposable moments, but these 88 minutes, like you needed every single one of those. There's no waste, and because of that, each scene really stands out. Like, I'll be honest with you, Ryan, sometimes I watch a movie and it's one of those things where, if it's just like a 3-star film that I'm not super into, or, it's overly complex or something, like I'll walk out retaining like 20% of what I just watched, right? But this is one of those movies where each scene landed for me. Whether it was a performance, whether it was a relationship, whether it was a specific commentary, each and every scene landed with power, and so it stuck with me. I was impressed by that. From there, I believe that this is an assured film, and I think that this is kind of what we were talking about with regard to Kubrick as a filmmaker. This doesn't feel like the work of someone who doesn't know what he's doing yet. I think that when we talk about how we're going to see a lot of the hallmarks of his visual filmmaking language, I think that this is kind of where all that comes together. I mean, I've seen most of his films at this point, except for, Spartacus and, 1 or 2 of those earlier ones. And this has all of those elements that we talk about. So this is a filmmaker who's finally understanding that, I am a good filmmaker. I do understand the medium. I can direct Kirk Douglas, shirt or no shirt. I'm going to tell him what to do. Fuck that guy. And so we really see him growing into his own. The third adjective that I have is juxtaposed. And I touched on this earlier, but I really appreciate when filmmakers, musicians, whoever it is, anytime an artist can take disparate elements that don't necessarily go together and weave them in such a way that even though they shouldn't really work, they do, I'm always very impressed by that. I appreciate that. It's a unique take on the material, at least for me. And so, again, the way that the theatrical performances juxtapose what you referred to as the gritty realism of it. The way that the Colonel Dax character, the lone position of authority, juxtaposes the rest of authority with regard to the fact that he's going to do the right thing, and literally everyone else is corrupted and selfish, self-directed, all of those things. So anytime you can sort of balance these different extreme elements against one another, I think it makes for great filmmaking, or whatever your medium is. And so, powerful, assured, juxtaposed, I believe represents Paths of Glory very well. Ryan, we are going to finish with my star rating and your grade rating. Tell us what you got for your grade, man.
Oh, I'm giving this one a good solid A. You know, it's not an A plus, maybe an A minus. You know, it's on the low A. You know, because you start to get into, you know, some of his masterpieces, or any masterpiece for that example, and you put this against it. I can't give it like an A plus, but it's a good solid A minus though. It was a very enjoyable film, and it wasn't that long. It was like we were in, we were out. Every scene had purpose. It had a great pace. And I never, you know, felt strung along, or I never was looking at my phone or was distracted. I was engaged the whole time. Solid A minus.
Excellent, man. Yeah, as usual, we're trending right about the same rating. My star rating is a solid 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is a movie that isn't necessarily perfect, but it gets pretty damn close. And part of it is, I think, just, you know, because it is a smaller scoped film, it is probably not. It's like a degree of difficulty rating, right? It didn't have, not to sound like not giving him the credit that is due for this film, but like it wasn't an achievement on the scale of a 2001 or a Clockwork Orange or something like that. Not to take away from what the film, like the film is pretty damn perfect for what it wants to be, but it's just, you know, again, when you take in the scope of his career and, you know, we're going to keep you in the trenches this whole time versus, you know, taking you out to space, I think 4.5 is probably about as good as you can get on a film like this. So very, very good movie. Loved every minute of it.
Yeah, I think we're being pretty generous.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, guys, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. And then when we come back, we are going to talk some high and low with you guys. Stick around.
From the imagination of acclaimed author Ashton Macaulay comes the next great anti-hero in American fiction. His name is Nick Ventnor, alcoholic by trade and monster hunter by profession. When Nick gets hired by a wealthy benefactor to find the lost gates of Shangri-La, it's up to him and his crotchety companion James to deliver the goods. The two soon find themselves on the adventure of a lifetime. And in addition to being chased by Nick's longtime rival Manchester, they soon find themselves being hunted by a mythical and elusive Yeti that has been terrorizing the Himalayas. Featuring non-stop action and an acerbic wit, Whiteout by Ashton Macaulay is a thriller-minute page-turner you won't be able to put down until it's finished. You can find Whiteout in ebook, hardcover, and paperback versions, online and everywhere books are sold. Published by Aberrant Literature.
Hey guys, welcome back. As we mentioned at the top of the show, we are going to look at a second film here, and that film is Akira Kurosawa's High and Low. Ryan, I believe you have a description for us, right?
I do. From 1963, we're going back to talk about Toshiro Mifune is unforgettable as Kingo Gondo, a wealthy industrialist whose family becomes the target of a cold-blooded kidnapper. In High and Low, the highly influential domestic drama and police procedural from director Akira Kurosawa. Adapting Ed McBain's detective novel, King's Ransom, Kurosawa moves effortlessly from compelling race-against-time thriller to exacting social commentary, creating a diabolical treatise on contemporary Japanese society. Oh my God, that's a long explanation. Jesus. The fuck? All right, wow. Well, you know, hey, look, the description matches the movie. This was a long one, and pretty
epically length movie, epic
like
description. There you go.
Yep, there you go.
Totally matches.
So I plotted my way through it. Sorry, everybody. You get it. It's a detective movie about kidnapping and you know, movement of wealth and so on. We've been there.
Absolutely. And look, we are going to have plenty of time to get into the specifics of this film. There is a lot to unpack in this one. Very good film. Right off the bat, do want to say enjoyed it a lot. Ryan, did you dig it?
I loved it. Yeah, absolutely.
Right on, man.
So ready for this?
What's
Space
that?
Fans?
What's that?
Here's another cinematic confession.
All right, let's hear it.
This is my Jesus. This is so hard to talk about. This is,
it's all right, dude.
This is my first.
You know what?
This is my first Kurosawa movie.
What?
Yeah, I know.
How is that possible, dude? Like, I don't
even know, man.
I
have
almost
no defense for myself.
I almost feel like I remember us having discussions about his work. I feel like you just sort of like BS'd your way through a lot of cocktail parties over the years. Yes, Rashomon. Oh, of course. Yes, Seven Samurai,
right,
of course.
right, yeah. Oh, no, I totally see what you mean there. Yeah, I mean, that's... that's what I've
that's
been doing
crazy,
this whole
though.
podcast.
Yeah,
and,
exactly, dude.
You busted me.
You know what,
I haven't watched
dude?
any of these films.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were talking about this, and we really should make some sort of like cinematic confessions or cinematic sins program or something, because and everybody listening to, dude, all of us have films that we should have watched, directors' work that we should have checked out, actors' work, etc. Everybody has gaps in their film history knowledge. It's just inescapable. There's way too much content. So if you're the type of person or the type of people like we are, where you take in a lot of different genres, dude, like what I'm saying is I forgive you. It took a minute.
Thank you.
It took a minute, but I worked through it here with you and with our listeners.
You feel better now? Do you feel better?
I do.
Did I help you through something?
It
All right,
was
well, there we
that was
go.
really jarring, dude. Yeah, no, it was really jarring.
I'm glad I could.
Even in
glad
the
I could
middle
help
of COVID, that was extremely jarring.
Well, man,
Yeah, that's saying something, right?
So High and Low, 1963, Kurosawa, my first Kurosawa movie, Play School, my first Kurosawa movie, and I liked it a lot. I'm definitely going to be getting to some other of his films. I think you had told me at one point that we actually have a few of his films on this list, so
we certainly
I'll be getting to them sooner or later. So
yeah,
don't kick me off.
Are you kidding? I'm going to drag you kicking and streaming, dude. You're not going anywhere, even if you want to. Even if I have to sit you through the lives of others 17 times, like Alex from A Clockwork Orange status, just holding your eyes open, strap down to a chair.
Terrible.
I'm keeping you around, dude.
So yeah,
let's get into the movie, shall we?
1963, High and Low. Yeah, absolutely.
So when we start this movie, we open up on a credit sequence that is overlaid across these really grimy shots of like an industrial sector. We get these wide landscapes showing off the busy streets. And then right from there, really quickly, juxtaposing shot, we're inside, looking at, inside a room that is, looking at the same city, but from the vantage point of a really sort of like high-end looking balcony. And there's several...
but before that, though, Jason... They cue us in the titles with some spooky music, and it's really dramatic. And then we go inside. We go inside this. I guess it's an apartment or a flat, and we meet our characters. Anyway, I just had to interject because the spooky music needed to be talked about.
Well, and that's funny too, because I was gonna bring this up later, but since it's here now, like. This is a movie where it really didn't use the score that much. I'm sure you took note of that too. Like it's almost like you don't want to call it a silent film, but in terms of background music and any sort of score driving a lot of the emotion or the thrill, they really just let the writing and the acting do all of the work on this, which was really interesting.
If I
think it worked to its benefit. I
might be getting this wrong, but I think the music was primarily used to like sync your scenes together and give us a bit of a bridge. Mm-hmm. The old like 1960s wind down, and then it goes to the next scene.
Yeah, and then there's a couple times later where they use the like sort of like slinky, like David Lynch barroom smoky jazz lounge type of music. The
absolutely
like that type of stuff.
I think there was a picture of Satchmo on the jazz club door later in the film. True story.
So we're inside this room. And there's a bunch of dudes, and they're sitting around a table, and they're all clearly very important, and they're arguing over something that we soon find out is shoes. Now, to be honest, Ryan, when I found out it was about shoes, I was like, oh, am I really going to be into this? This could be dry. I don't know how, but they made shoes really fascinating, man. Like, I was really into this, and I was like, well, no, the guy doesn't want to make crap shoes, and you guys need to stop putting profits ahead of quality. Like, come on, Kingo's a good guy. To stop busting his balls. Like, it was just, like I said, and it was also funny that the company is called National Shoe Company. It sounds like it's like a subsidiary of the Acme Corporation or something like that. Like,
very generic.
And it's funny too, because also like I know nothing of like Japanese culture in terms of like commerce over there, and like is that like a reference to the fact that they have these very like descriptive names? There's like, Japanese nail company and like whatever, and then or is it because like if that was an American film, like you would absolutely 100% believe that was satire, right? Like, oh, they call it National Shoe Company, they're making fun of it. I don't know if that was not or not, but I feel like it's besides the point. So anyway, they're
I
talking.
don't know. I mean, they could just be government provided shoes or something. The shoes of the state.
Stasi Shoe Company.
Communist shoes. Yeah, they only come in red.
So anyways, there's certain of these board members. They're talking to our protagonist Kingo, and they're talking to him about how they should be making cheap, low-quality shoes because it's going to increase their profitability and the rate of consumption. But the current president isn't going to let them because he wants to make quality shoes. But it's said that if they put their shares together, that they could take majority control and they could basically make this power play and oust the old man and sort of, stage a coup of sorts. And immediately, our protagonist, played by, as you mentioned before, Toshiro Mifune, he gets really upset by the entire idea, doesn't want to attach his name to crap products. He is looking at it from a long-term perspective, wants to make modern, stylish shoes, but they're still quality, and they're going to get, long-term customer
built to
allegiance.
last.
Yeah, exactly. But it's going to be at the expense of short-term profitability, and this upsets the other members of the board, as we've seen play out 1,000 times in these sorts of films. And, so Ryan, I want to ask you one thing, right? So you're in the filmmaking industry, or at least the entertainment industry, television, commercial, what have you. Do you have to consider a lot of things like, profitability and value proposition that often, or are these kind of foreign terms to you?
Yeah, that's above my pay grade. I'm an on-set guy.
Yeah, so let me tell you, dude, because I'm in sales, and it's just like, so as someone who's been doing sales for close to 10 years now or something like that, like, this is every damn conversation you hear every damn day, all the time, and it's so frustrating, dude. It's so frustrating because, like, whereas this movie kind of shows a reverence to the Kingo character and the president for making, like, quality shit, because Kurosawa is obviously a man of good taste and of good quality. He makes excellent films, and so it's so annoying to hear these conversations time and time again about how all of these, like, various people in these corporations just want to make shit, dude. Like, they just want to make shit, and they want to make stuff that will break so that they can sell you more of it. And it just contributes to this overall sort of, like, pay-to-live approach to society that we have. And, like I said, like, when I'm watching this, dude, it frustrates me because I don't know that... I mean, obviously this has been around forever, but it's just like, it's taken on such a huge, crazy sort of monumental part of our society, just this drive for profit. And no one makes good shit anymore, and everyone makes crap to break, and also, dude, like, what the fuck is up with commoditizing basic necessities, man? Here's the thing, dude. Like, the only reason that we have to, like, go and work these shit jobs as much as we do is because everything that we need to survive as people has been commoditized, dude. Like, you want a roof over your head? That's gonna cost half your paycheck. You want to feed yourself? That's gonna cost a quarter of your paycheck. Don't even imagine getting sick, right? Like Kurt Vonnegut, like, in one of his books back then, like, there's that line that he has where he's talking about, like, he's talking about Earth from this, like, outside vantage point, and he's doing this, and he mentions, like, in an almost documentary sort of point of view, he's like, yeah, in Earth, one of the most expensive things you could do is get sick. Way more expensive than any vacation you could ever possibly take. Right? And at the time, like, you read that and you're younger and it's like, oh, that's kind of a funny. And then you grow up and you're like, it's absolutely fucking true. And it's so fucked up that we live in a society where, like, one of the absolute most expensive things you can do is get sick and fight for your life. Like he said, more than any vacation, more than any car. And it's really upsetting to sit there and watch these movies and know that just these are the type of people that are literally constructing the society that we live in, and it's bullshit and it's upsetting. Rant over.
Do you feel better, buddy?
No, I don't. I'm pissed off. I want to punch some corporate bigwigs, man.
Man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been Talking Through Stuff with Jason and Ryan. The Talking Through Stuff show.
Yeah, I believe
with Jason and Ryan.
I've got some pamphlets out in the front. When you leave, go ahead and grab one.
Folks, we are 2.5 minutes into this movie, and Jason's already having an existential crisis about shoes and capitalism and a communist state, no less, which is really weird. He's mad about the capitalists in communist China.
Dude, I know, but and also just so you know, I'm not one of these anti-capitalist people. Like, we all need jobs. Capitalism is a good thing for society. It's just, God forbid we should find a balance in anything, right? Everything has to be some giant extreme one thing or the other, dude.
Jason,
It's like either just like vicious, violent, abhorrent capitalism or vicious, violent, abhorrent socialism. And those are our only two options. Like, let's meet halfway, people. Let's get a mediator in here. Let's meet halfway, God damn it. It's not sustainable.
So, this is Jason having a meltdown. Jesus. Yeah, so we have that opening scene. And then, we see the cards are stacked against old Gondo, and he's got to make some moves. He's making some big money moves, and we find out after a phone call that he's got some backdoor deals going on with some other shareholders, and he's looking to get majority stake by a long shot, and he has leveraged everything, right down to the clothes on his back, to get the shares he needs to outvote the board members who were just riding his ass a few moments ago, saying he makes too expensive shit. He kicked them out, and then now we find out his secret plans to really buy the majority share from all the other shareholders, and he's going to run this shoe company. By Jove, damn it! And and then then that's when the movie takes off, and it feels like, by the way, I think we're like 25 minutes into the movie with everything I just kind of summarized right there. It was a long haul to get us to where we needed to go.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I did appreciate about the film, so it's a tale of two halves that we'll get into. The first half takes place pretty much entirely in the living room of Kingo's apartment, flat, whatever it is. And so one of the things that I really appreciated about the film was the way that they presented it as though it was almost like a theatrical production, you know, with the staging of the
it felt
actors.
very theatrical.
Yeah,
yes.
The way that they used lighting, and there'd be certain
the way
shots.
They used music.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, there'd be certain shots where, you know, like Kingo would be in the background in sort of dark silhouette contemplating his situation. And then, you know, there's these actors in the foreground that are all lit up, and that's where the action's taking place. And you can sort of scan back and forth. I love when filmmakers do that. When they know what they're doing and it's someone as prolific and talented as a Kurosawa, it's done really effectively. I agree. It's just a style that's great to watch.
I think it was the time too, like just the nature of the film that he shot it on, and it was black and white. There was a lot of things that just kind of made it feel otherworldly, and so that you could, do a bit of a stage play thing with it, and it felt very stagey to me, and I loved it. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are in this room for a while, though, so I hope you liked it, because you're not going to get much else for a little bit. At one point, I wrote down, this is like Chinatown with better drapery. Dude, that guy's drapes are on point. I love his drapes.
Yeah, no, it was classy. By the way, one of the things that I noted is, I haven't seen a lot of Japanese cinema. I'm not really familiar with like what a traditional upper crust house would be, right? Like, but the house that they were in reminded me a lot of the house from Parasite. Just the whole outlay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh wow. Nice one.
Yeah. So and again, I don't know if that's pretty common over there. Like that's just how houses are built, or if that's just a style that lends itself well to filmmaking. It's kind of like we were talking about a little moment ago, or before the break, with Kubrick. Like when you watch Kubrick films, they always take place in these sort of like giant libraries and giant, really ritzy sort of apartments. It's never in
really
like
grandiose,
a dingy,
yeah,
it's never a dingy roach infested sort of sublet room. It's always these really sort of nice, like you can tell he was a rich kid and he was used to nice things for sure.
Well, even the final scenes of 2001 when the guy's sitting there writing in his diary or whatnot,
yeah, totally.
And we go through and see the fetus on the bed all glowing and stuff, like that chamber room that he's in writing his last notes or memoir or what have you, is pretty over the top. Even that was cool.
Yeah.
Even though it was like not so simple, looked like an IKEA, stage floor.
So as you said, Ryan, he's leveraged, Kingo that is, he's leveraged everything that he has to try to make a play for this majority control of the company. Immediately he gets a call from what ends up being a kidnapper, and they demand a ransom for his son. Except that, lo and behold, it actually turns out that the kidnappers didn't kidnap his son. They actually kidnapped his son's friend, and they had just switched outfits, which is why the kidnappers thought that it was Kingo's son and not his. I don't even think the guy's his friend, but the boy is at least
no, it's his
son's
driver.
Friend. It's his driver. Yes, correct.
Yeah, it's his driver's son. And since his driver's always around, then the two kids got to know each other pretty well. They were
correct.
playing.
So even though he learns that it's not his son, he's still like, well, still gonna hold him for ransom. It's gonna make you look bad if you don't pay. So that kind of sets up our central conflict that's gonna take up the majority of the first half of the film. And yeah,
it's a kidnapping movie.
Correct.
And like Taken or something like that, but not quite as action packed. So around this point, the movie took a weird turn because he was when it was his son, and then when it became his driver's son, and they found out that they kidnapped the wrong boy, the whole mood changed with Kingo Gondo, and so it was. At first, I was like, "Oh, it's not my son. Fuck that kid." Then, and it just seemed like a little abrupt the way that the way he just turned out, But he ended up sticking up for the kid in the end and did the right thing. So whatever.
Yeah. I mean, so at first, like you say, he's gonna think about it. He's not really sure what he's gonna do, and I did like that, by the way. I think that Kingo wasn't
turmoil.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they presented Kingo as sort of a more compassionate version of that strong-willed businessman that we see. So like Scorsese's Kingo doesn't give a fuck, dude. He's like, fuck that kid. I've got things to do, right? He's played by De Niro, and De Niro doesn't care. But Kurosawa's Kingo is, has more compassion, and he really wrestles with the emotions. He doesn't just say screw the kid right away. Like, he really has to consider it. I think he ends up sleeping on it. And it's not until the next morning where he's like, you know what? Like, yeah, I'm sorry. I just can't do that. Like, business is my blood, and I just can't throw away my entire life, and I'm very sorry. And so, just the fact that, again, he's not a callous man, it does weigh on him. And I really liked that aspect of his character.
So, yeah, I mean, just to kind of double back and explain a little bit more to that, too, is in the beginning of the film, he's basically threatened by the three council members, I guess you'd call them, or board members that were going to vote him out and kick him out because of his shoes, like we had said. And so the money, the ransom money that he has to collect at this point in the film now was the money that he had leveraged everything on to buy those shares. So now he can't buy the shares. He's going to be kicked out of the company by the people after all, because he wasn't able to buy a majority share, and he's leveraged to the gills to get all this money in the first fucking place. So he understands that if he pays his ransom and doesn't get it back in time, he's going to lose everything. And so therein lies the kind of inner struggle of that character for a portion of the film. Will he or won't he? And it's interesting. I have in my notes here that he literally at this point in the film becomes the ticking clock. Because as you go through the film from this point on, after the ultimatum has been given to him, he starts to digress and deteriorate as he loses things to auction. You see him lose his wealth slowly but surely. At one point, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, they even make it a point that he's mowing his own lawn. He starts to lose his staff and have to take care of himself. And you see the de-evolution of man from wealth to poverty, and he's your ticking clock because when he's broke and destitute on the street, it's too late. So we got to get this man his money back. Oh, and also the driver's kid too, but also the money.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting perspective. I actually didn't consider that. The other thing that I liked as well was that's when they introduce more or less the wife. And again, it's, especially at the time, Japanese culture, early 60s, everything that goes along with that. I think that they made her, more of a strong-willed character. Ultimately, she does defer to her husband's wishes, but she's not afraid to actually sort of get in his face, and not in any disrespectful way, but whereas everybody else sort of cowers in fear from him, she's like, hey, we need to do what's right.
No, she steers him right.
Yeah, we need to do what's right. We need to pay this money. This is what's up. Please do this, blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, I
That's some
think that,
teammate
and then
shit.
and then he doesn't just immediately turn around and slap her. You know, he listens to her. So I really liked the way that they.
Jesus, is that your go-to? He doesn't actually turn around and slap her.
No, just playing with the archetype of that type of character. Again, like in Martin Scorsese's version, like Robert De Niro like smacks his wife and tells her to get out of here. There's man work to do, right? And this doesn't take that tone. Like this takes a much more
they're not Italian.
like mature and different tone, and like just, you know, maybe
Right.
it's just the cinema that I've seen, but again, like rarely do you see these powerful businessmen that are really treated with compassion and have solid relationships, and they're not cheating on their wife with younger
Wow.
mistresses and all
Yeah.
this crap, right? Like,
Yeah.
like, so those
No, this guy's
types
straight
of-
and narrow.
Yeah, so those types of things kind of stood out to me as I was watching this, and that's the only reason I bring it up is just that I felt that whether it was an archetype at the time or not, it's since become an archetype, and it was refreshing to see a character play against that.
The corrupt businessman is not corrupt. Crazy.
Yeah, you know, like it's got a lot less cynicism than a lot of, you know, all of our anti-corporation, which after my whole rant, I'm sitting here criticizing our anti-corporate perspective, but
This is
there you
also
go.
this is also the time in the movie we get introduced to the cops too, and who were with the rest of the film. And my favorite is Boston, the man they call Boston, and man, they rib him the entire movie about how ugly he is.
Oh yeah, that guy. I had a hard time with the names, dude. I couldn't.
And
follow
they would
who
always
that
like
was.
high five each other, like sick burn, bro. There was a lot of those. I don't know, man. Kurosawa had a funny sense of humor. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, definitely. So, like you say, we've eventually, well, you know, before that, I mean, we've got the whole payout scene, you know. So let's not lose sight of that, because before that happens, you know, we've got the whole thing where the kidnapper calls in, and you know, there's that scene where he's like, "I can see you," and you know, they end up closing the drapes, and he's like, "Don't do anything funny." So there's that whole scene, and then from there, they get another call, and then eventually Kingo relents, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pay this ransom. And they end up striking a deal to meet with the kidnapper on the train with the boy, which is where the exchange is going to be made. And so, you know, the cops, everyone else go down there, and at the 11th hour, they get a note from, I believe it was someone random, or maybe a conductor, I forget exactly who, and or maybe it was another investigator. It says that the child is not on the train, and then from there, they immediately get a call, and it's the kidnapper, and he's instructing them to throw the money out of the bathroom window in the suitcase at a predetermined area, and they're just going to pick it up from there and release the kid. And I thought that was a really, and I thought that was a really effectively shot scene. I love me some tracking shots, dude. Whether they're handheld. Yeah, man, whether they're handheld, whether they're on tracks, whether you're Kubrick or whether you're Kurosawa, it was really cool. Anytime you have those tight corridors, even something like Das Boot, you know, like just any of those tight corridors with those tracking shots, it always works for me, dude. Always.
No, I agree. I loved it. And there was it felt so frenetic compared to what they just shown us for what must have been 45 minutes, where we were in the house, and it was a lot of back and forth. And by the end, it was kind of exhausting because it was fairly repetitive conversations with the kidnapper, making new demands and trying to come to terms. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're in this train and you're about to make the exchange, and you got the money in the bag and all this stuff. And the way it was shot, and the music choices, and all the sound, the screeching of the train, the click-clack of the train, all of that was stellar, and gave a really refreshing bump to this film exactly at the right moment that I felt it needed it. Because I was starting to kind of wane a little bit in the house. But towards the end, I was like, we got to get out of this house. It's all just here. And then all of a sudden, we're in like the coolest scene, one of the coolest scenes of the movie.
Yeah. Maybe there's something to the psychology of being in quarantine as well. You're like, look, I'm not watching a movie to sit in a goddamn living room for hours at a time. Right. I can do that all day, every day. Take me somewhere else. Anywhere
they made a
else,
movie
please.
about this? How the fuck they make a movie about this? No, I agree.
Yeah, so you know, and then I did like the line where, you know, before Toshiro, or Kingo as it is, drops the money out of the bathroom, he basically says that he specifically says, I'm trading my life for the boys, and he does it anyway. And again, you know, much in the same way that in Paths of Glory, you know, Colonel Dax was given opportunities to be honorable in the face of, challenging situations. We get that here with Kingo's character. And so again, like there's no way to not respect him for doing that, so we get built-in pathos right away. There's nobody that's not on board with Kingo by this point because he did make that sacrifice. And regardless of what you think about business or not, you can still appreciate the sacrifice that he made and the degree to which he made it.
Yeah, no doubt. To the point where he could even potentially lose his family and his wife. It was mentioned a couple times that she's never known poverty, and so she wouldn't know how to hang. And I'm certain that was weighing on him as well, because they had more than one conversation about it. Then we go on a bit of a manhunt after this all gets swapped out. And, the cops were on the train. They saw the whole thing. They got some footage of the people that collected the money and swapped the kid and so forth. And from here on out, we're with the cops for most of the film. And the main character or family that lost the boy, all of that kind of plays as a backdrop to this police drama. All of a sudden, this procedural, Law and Order SVU style police drama.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be the rest of the film. Is we're basically going to be following along with a combination of the police as well as the kidnapper, and then also the driver and his son, because they kind of end up being like the carrot to the cop's stick, right? Like,
right, yeah.
They're kind of going through and the son sort of the father sort of admonishing the son because he feels really guilty about the fact that he had to have his boss like spend all that money to free his kid. And so he's like, we got to find it. We got to find the place. You need to think harder. You need to be remembering these things. Like, we basically like, we've got to figure this out and get this guy's money back because like, we can't live with this, but really I can't live with this. Right. Because the kid's too young to really understand the gravity of what's going on. So yeah. And he's going to kind of, like I said, lead the cops a little bit and lead us as an audience toward the kidnapper. And,
they get the kid back, and he's the only one that knows where the fuck he was because he saw everything out the window. Now, they find out that they did knock him out or drug him with ether, so they've got that clue, where to get ether from in such a pure supply that would knock out somebody so quickly, I guess. Mm-hmm. So they had that little lead, but other than that, like, the kid is pretty much the key to this whole thing because he knows where he was geographically speaking by looking for monuments and stuff. So we see him and his dad get in little adventures here and there trying to find out where he was because of his dad's guilt and remorse for the whole thing and how it went down. But yeah, again, all that's kind of played out even through all of this with the deterioration of Gondo. And this is around the time you see him mowing his own lawn, like I said. And there always seems to be a clock ticking around too. I think it was pretty deliberate that he's our ticking clock. The broker he gets, the closer we are to the end of the film.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I mean, like, yeah, and he's almost immediately forced out of the company after this whole thing goes down.
Yeah.
The borrowers refuse to loan him the money. Basically, like, that money was going to be used for collateral, and instead they're like, oh, yeah, no, you need to pay us in full, or else we're going to take all your property. Of course, he can't do that until they find him. It's going to be the case that even though ultimately they will find him and get his money back, it's going to be too late. A lot of his stuff is already auctioned off. So, we are seeing the consequences of his sacrifice, and it is kind of nice. It's a little bit of a dichotomy of an ending just from the standpoint of the fact that he does get his money back, but he still kind of loses his possession and the company, but then he's also working for like a new shoe company. But yeah, to get back to what you were saying about where the dad and his son were kind of going on, I thought that was a chance for just Kurosawa to get just some really beautiful photography in. I don't know if you felt the same way, but there was just some shots of like some just really nice exterior landscapes of the ocean and Mount Fiji. And to your point, from being trapped in that house the whole time for an hour plus, it was really nice to get out and see some of these really lush environments.
Yeah, he took you for a walk. Took you for a little stroll, midday stroll on a Wednesday. Felt nice. We've
been sitting there scratching at the window panes for so long, and it was just getting all foggy from our breath. And finally, he just opened that door, and we just ran out, so excited. Our little tails shaking. Just let's go for a walk.
Let's go for a walk with Kurosawa. Going for walks. Yeah. So then they go to the kidnapper's house. They follow these clues all around town. where they could have been calling from, listen for stuff in the background, things he had mentioned about being hot, and, oh, you're up on the hill, which means he's down in the valley, and so forth. And he can see in the drapes the whole time. Those damn drapes, man. I wanted those drapes. They could see in the drapes and see in the dude's house the whole time, so they know what they're up to with the cops and shit at this point, I think. And, yeah, we go in the kidnapper's house. We follow Gondo's driver and his son up on the hill, and we get to the actual place he was being held for, and we find that the kidnappers are dead inside.
Yeah, so it's basically revealed that the kidnappers were heroin addicts, and as the cops test the heroin, they find that it's 90% pure, which is like way more than street, and so they believe that it was a murder where it was an intentional overdose using some like too powerful heroin, and because of everything involving the bigwigs at the corporation, they're the first suspects that come up on the cops' radar. And so they're going to come up with a plan to try to trick the kidnapper, whoever it was, and they're not going to publish the details of the death. And they're also going to indicate that some of the money was stolen to buy drugs with, because that was a threat that the actual kidnappers had made to the guy who was funding the operation. From there, we go back to the kidnapper, and he's reading this article about Kingo, and Kingo's getting good press right now because everybody appreciates his sacrifice, despite what's happening to him. And subsequently, National Shoe Company is being boycotted, and that's when he fails to see the details of the kidnapper's death, and all of this combines to where he takes the bait, and he believes that the kidnappers are still alive, he being the ultimate kidnapper who's bankrolling the situation. And so, and I think he might have also like gotten some sort of note or something like that. I don't recall. Like I said, there was a lot to unpack in this movie. But yeah, so either way, he believes that the kidnappers are not dead, and so he needs to go try to basically do this whole thing again, right? He needs to get some more really pure heroin so that he can like stage this accidental overdose when really it's just a murder. So we're gonna follow him.
Get rid of the evidence.
Yeah, so we're gonna follow him alongside the cops as he kind of goes through his little operation of his own for the remainder of the film. Now, Ryan, I do want to ask you about something. So it's right about now where Kingo's offered this sort of like lame duck position at National Shoe because they want like better press from the boycott. He rightly tells them to go fuck themselves. He couldn't give a shit less. And then all of a sudden there's this like sort of random shot, and it's of like a factory where there's just like, you know, it's an exterior wide shot, smoke's belching from the chimney, whatever. It's just the smoke is colored pink. Did you catch that?
Yeah. No, that was the pink smoke from the suitcase, the briefcase that they stitched in the little pill earlier in the film.
Wait, so explain it, man. I totally missed that. Back up this truck a little bit and tell me what's going on.
So when they had the two briefcases that they were going to put the money in, do you remember that the police said we have these two things, one of which, if it gets wet, it'll stink really bad. And the other, if it gets burned, it'll put out pink smoke. And so hopefully one of the two of these things will happen because the kidnapper's going to have to ditch the evidence, i.e. these briefcases, because the briefcases were ugly as sin. And they would stand out in a crowd or whatever. He's not going to keep them. So he's going to try to get rid of them somehow. Chances are burn them or drown them. So the pink smoke was, do you remember when Gondo was sitting on the floor and he's like, no, let me do it. Back in the day when people made shoes, they made suitcases too. And so I know all about the stitching, and he ripped out the stitching and put the pills where they needed to go so they would have the appropriate effect if they're ever given the chance to catch this guy.
Wow,
do you not remember that?
I do not remember any of this at all whatsoever. And I feel like, dude, I have a very substantial like summary that I wrote up for this film. It's the longest one by far for any film we've done yet. And still there's things that I missed, man. This is like we said at the top show, this is just a film with so much to unpack. But no, I completely missed that, dude.
Yeah, that was the whole thing that happened. And so the pink smoke was the briefcases burning. And they're like, oh, there it is. Gotcha, bitch. And they went down to the incinerator. And that's when they had the conversation with the the grimy old man in the incinerator. And they're like, "What'd you burn today?" Boston was down there, and he was, getting the business from this guy. He's like, "Well, there was one guy." And then he's like, "Oh, okay, tell me about this one guy." He's like, "Oh, I'm going to tell you everything about this one guy." And it's like, whoa, you knew all that? Like, he's a doctor. He works at such and such medical. He's an intern. He's been there for 2.5 years. He has easy access to everything you're looking for. Like, I was like, oh, wow, okay. This escalated quickly. That guy had all the intel.
Yeah. Well, and it's shortly after that we actually start sort of winding down, and the cops actually do catch the kidnapper, but they don't want to arrest him just yet. And they actually notice his, I guess it's a signature wristband. We're bringing it up for the first time in the entire damn program. Probably should have mentioned that earlier, but he's got this wristband that he wears. And so they happen to see it, and, they confirm that it's him. But like I said, I think they only get 15 years for kidnapping over there. And so they basically want to put him away for life. So they want to wait and kind of trail him and catch him doing some more shit so they can put him away for life.
They got to link him to the murders of the drug dealers. And so they faked it as if they were still alive, and he failed and wasn't able to kill them by taking a note that they had written and resubmitting it to him, like refilling the note back in and submitting it to him saying, basically, give me more drugs or we're going to talk. Mm-hmm. And the jig is up. And so he's now got to go re-kill these two people, so he thinks. But what he's really doing is, going right into the cop's trap, because once they get him at the scene of the crime of these murders with the heroin to overdose them again, they can directly link him to the kidnapping and everything else, and including the murders, and he would go away for life if not be killed. So cool.
Yeah. So, and then, there's that scene. I thought this was a great scene where they trail him to that bazaar. And that was a great scene. A lot of really cool
dude, how sick were those glasses?
Yes,
his fucking glasses,
so hip,
were
dude.
So reflective,
so hip. Yeah, no,
I kept looking into his glasses. I watched this on a giant screen. I kept looking into his glasses to try to find the film crew, and I did not. So I don't know how Kurosawa did that. They almost look like graphics are overlaid or something. Like it's almost fake. It's so clear,
totally
and reflective and shiny.
On that,
what it reminded me of? I
think I do. What are you going to say?
Elijah Wood's character in Sin City?
Absolutely 100%, buddy. 100%.
Yes!
I was going to say it if you didn't, dude. This is why we're friends,
bro. It looked to be a big impact. Because I know that's all, based on the Sin City graphic novels and A Dame to Kill For and all that. But, I'll be damned if I don't think that Rodriguez saw this film and thought that was a cool-ass effect like I did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and that's kind of the cool thing about, like, art is that it exists and persists beyond generations. Like, you can't for sure tell me that Frank Miller wasn't influenced by these visuals and put them into Sin City, who would later be picked up by Robert Rodriguez. Like, these things sort of get passed down like stories to generations.
Yeah,
it's really cool to see, man. That's one of the things that I always really appreciate is just sort of, watching how various shots persist and the way that different cinematic techniques will, ebb and flow over the course of time. You're always going to have transitions and cuts and close-ups and things of that nature, right? But like dolly ins and dolly outs and zooms, I think I mentioned before how, like, every time I watch a 70s film, it's just like, oh, they clearly just invented the zoom lens because everyone loves some freaking zooming, especially if the film takes place in New York, man. Like, I don't know, they were probably just like, sweet, dude, we can just film the whole thing from my apartment. We'll just stick it out there and just zoom in on everyone and we'll be able to see them. It's great.
And print and wrap. Yep. Did you know, Jason, that in this same scene where they're tracking the guy down to go buy drugs for the new overdose, the trap that they've set, he goes to a little swanky discotheque and to go buy these drugs after a brief stop off at the docks for some reason that wasn't really explained. And so the dance that they do, because he gets a red carnation, puts it in his pocket to signify that he wants drugs, I guess, or that, he's him. Mm-hmm. And this woman spots him. They start dancing and before they do the drug exchange. Yes. And that dance is the exact same dance, I guess, that Uma Thurman and John Travolta did in Pulp Fiction.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, that was all, I guess, what inspired him for that whole scene. So, yeah.
Why is it the more you learn about Tarantino, the more you learn just exactly who he stole each film and part and storyline from?
Steal with both hands. Yeah. So
I mean, I
right
love
after
the guy,
this,
dude.
we go to
He's among my favorite filmmakers of all time, if not like at the top. But yeah, dude, I mean, if you want to be polite about it, I guess you can say he is a very influenced director.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So after this, our cops and our kidnapper go to a heroin den because he's got to try these drugs. He's got the drugs now. He wants to test them out on a junkie to see if it could is it strong enough to kill a bear? Like, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
And so he goes into this heroin den, and this is where we're introduced to heroin zombies, which were fucking bananas. This whole scene was crazy.
I loved it so much.
They're like braids, and clawing at him like zombies.
Yeah, well, and this place is called Dope Valley, and it's shot just like a horror film. It's incredibly dark, incredibly stark, feels really dank and depressing. All of the people kind of have that rotted, sunken look because they're all addicts, and they move slow like zombies. And yeah, the metaphor there was just perfectly done. I loved it. And yeah, so he ends up finding a heroin-addicted woman, and he uses her to test the drugs on to make sure that they're pure enough. And it turns out, hey, guess what? They are. She dies almost instantly. And after that, the cops have seen all of this. So they've seen him, even though they kind of missed him buying the drugs, I think. They did see him murdering this woman with the drugs. So they're basically waiting for him outside of his house. He's like just getting ready to go ahead and, gonna go take care of these heroin addicted kidnappers that are fucking with my shit. And
Right.
And then the cops come out, pop out the trees. Hey, we got you, buddy. And they pretty quickly recover most of his money, actually, and deliver it back to Kingo.
There. Except for a few thousand that he spent on drugs, trying to kill those people. It's all there, accounted for.
Unfortunately, it's a little bit too late, as most of his possessions and his house and everything has already been auctioned off. But at least there's some sort of silver lining there. He does get his money back, and by the time it ends, he's also got a new job with a new shoe factory, and he's not making nearly the money that he was, but he's given a lot of freedom and autonomy, and he's kind of happy with that. So
it's funny because right around this time, the cops go to his house and they're asking him, hey, we got all your money. Good news, blah, blah, blah. Was it in time? And then he's like, sit down. And we kind of do a pan around the room, and we see all these things have stickers going to the auction, the reserved for auction. And even the chairs they're sitting on. So everything's being sold. He's fucked. Even though he's got his money back, I guess it was too late and he already lost his position. So he's going to have to rebuild. And then we do a pan around the room, and I swear to God, they do a zoom in on an actual fucking ticking clock, and the ticking clock dongs. And like the alarm goes, or it's on the hour type of thing. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? We have an actual ticking clock alarm going off. It is too late. Dong, dong. Like, oh, there we go. That's money.
Well, you know what? Maybe these were like the winks and nods of their time, right? Like in the early 60s, it was like, oh, that's cute, Akira. We like what you did there.
So then we get to the very end where we find out the kidnapper will only speak to our man Gondo and to give the rundown of why he did this. And it's maybe one of the more unsatisfying conclusions I've seen in a film. Kurosawa was already done. He's like, wrap it up. Let's go home, everybody. I don't care. Just say you did it because your mom beat you or something. You had a bad childhood. That's the deal, right? Going on.
He's like, I never expected us to be here this long to begin with. Everybody go home to your wives and girlfriends.
How long's this movie? 2.5 hours? Oh, fuck. We got to wrap this up.
He's like, yeah, I'm 20 minutes over my studio mandate. We got to go.
Yeah. Wind this down. I was a little wordy, apparently.
And it is funny because, he, like I said, Kingo Gondo, he expresses that he doesn't really mind working for this new company. And, the kidnapper puts up that whole, like, I don't care, I'm not scared, tough guy facade. But, of course, he ends up breaking down quickly because that's how that always goes, right? And then, Yeah, and then instead of any sort of epilogue or even just a visual indicator that the movie's over, just like a slow sort of pan out or zoom out or something. We just dissolved to black. Movie over. Finished. Done. Let's get out of here.
They rolled down the peep show garage door. There's like a peep show, like an old Times Square peep show garage door looking thing that like rolled up to reveal our kidnapper prisoner, and then it rolled back down and then fade to black, like you said, and that was that.
Yeah. And I guess like it was kind of one of those things like, oh, you're done, Akira? Yep. Nothing left to say. Sure, you don't want to give a little wrap it up speech? Nope. I'm good. So I'll go home. Good.
We're
said
good.
what I want to say. But yeah, and maybe that was just something about we never know if is that a visual language of the time? Is it a visual language of the geography? Is it specific to this artist? Is there maybe some other sort of Easter egg fact behind why he did that, or he just didn't care? Obviously he knows what he's doing as a filmmaker, but
I was entertained all the way through. I really enjoyed this movie. I look back on it, I would watch it again. It just didn't have that Hitchcockian wrap up that you maybe were expecting based on how far you had come into the film and all the places you had gone. But I guess it was more about the journey, not the destination in this one. So High and Low, 1963, Kurosawa, you got me. I liked it.
Great film. Loved it.
I did. I will say this. So on the killer, or the kidnapper, excuse me. Well, I guess he was a killer too. He had that hand wrap, right? And we find out later in the film when we see him without the hand wrap, he's got a really deep gash in his hand. And I just thought, and that's what he was covering up to identify himself with the hand wrap. And as he was doing all these criminal activities. And I just kept thinking, like, what if his whole motive was out of revenge to Gondo because he got hurt because his shoes were too sturdy. And the woman was like stepping on his hand or something. He's like, your shoes, they were too dependable. And he shows his hand and it's all cut and gashed in. I was really hoping for a wrap up like that.
That would have been great. Yeah, no, it was not. It had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he grew up in squalor, literally watching this shining house on a hill for his entire existence and everything that represented.
It kind of did have a Parasite vibe to it, man. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't notice that until you mentioned it. So
yeah, exactly.
That's kind of the same thing of that.
Yeah, and but no, it actually, as we would later learn, it had nothing to do with that, and had everything to do with that bitch of a woman who stepped on his hand, with that exceptionally made Kingo shoe.
Those Kingos, they'll get you, man. Don't get stepped on by the Kingos. That's about all I got, man. It was a fun film, and I can't wait to watch more Kurosawa films. And I'm really sorry to everybody for not having seen more.
Yes, shame.
I'll remedy it soon. I'll get back on it. I know. I'll get on it.
So as we do, Ryan, why don't you hit us up with your 3 adjectives for High and Low?
Oof. This movie was a noir, and I didn't. Man, this is another one of those I didn't really know what I was walking into. I didn't read in the summary that it was a detective drama and this and that, but this was a good old-fashioned Bogey and Bacall style noir, and I really appreciated it. This also, I was trying to figure out a way to say it, and you said it better. I was trying to think of like, not divisive, that's not the word, but you said it was a tale of two halves. That's a great way to put it because it definitely does have segments, and it was so different. Like it was almost jarring, the beginning, middle, and end of this film, but they felt like 3, isolated chapters, and gritty. I mean, very much like that's something I'm going to talk about here in our comparisons, but very much like Paths of Glory, this was a gritty film. I looked on what other films were coming out around this era to see if this was a trend or not. I just thought it was really interesting that, I got to watch, because, some of these classic films you go into not really knowing if they're going to be good or not, or have a really slow pace, or we kind of dealt with that with Wild Strawberries. And so, but Kurosawa won me over, man. I really appreciated this film.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm glad that you had the same adjective for 2 different films in the same program. That's cool. Gritty. Giving you shit, buddy. Okay, so for my 3 adjectives, my first one I've got is methodical. You know, this is a film that wasn't afraid to take its time. It set its pieces very distinctly, very slowly, very deliberately, and everything really took a while to pay off. Carrying over from that, we have that this is a slow burn of a film. You know, this isn't a film that you're going to want to come to if you're looking for a lot of hyperkinetic editing and fast camera movements, and even the acting style. I mean, we didn't really talk about, but like Mifune was great in this movie. I don't think we talked about.
Absolutely.
I absolutely loved his performance, and it's one of those things where obviously I can watch the subtitles, but it's like I don't specifically know the words that are coming out of his mouth, but it almost makes it more impressive because I can feel the emotion with, like, when he's bringing that fire, or when he's, you know, really wrestling with the weight of this situation. It really comes through. And so even with that language barrier there, still just a wonderful, wonderful performance. And the thing that you'll like, Ryan, is Toshiro Mifune is Akira Kurosawa's guy, okay? Like every
Right.
movie he does stars that guy. So you're going to get to see a lot of him.
I did know that. Yeah. And that's going to be on my comparison list as well, is, you know, the relationships these directors had with their actors.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah. So, and then my last adjective is dense AF. As we discussed over the course of this film, or this podcast rather, this is just a film with so much going on and so many layers, and I doubt very much that anybody who watches it once is going to be able to pick up on everything. I mean, both of us had things that, you know, we missed, and especially me with that whole smoke and the suitcase thing. Like, I don't even know what the hell happened there. So, yeah, this is a movie with, like, a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to watch and take note of. And so, methodical, slow burn, dense AF. Now it's time for that star and grade rating. Ryan, hit us up with your grade rating for high and low.
I gave this one a B+.
Okay.
I mean, I was entertained all the way through. I have nothing bad to say about this film. I think that now that I'm on to, you know, the trail here for Kurosawa films, I think I'm going to see better. So you can't just come right out and say, oh, that's his A movie. You know, I'm going to go say B+.
Okay.
It was for a 2.5 hour film, I never felt bored. I was never looking at my phone. It had a great pace. Like you said, the acting was stellar. And the 3 parts felt very different. So it felt kind of like I was, just as I was sick of one thing, it, you know, dragged me along to a whole other, you know, action beats and the pacing of the film and everything. So it was refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely. Good instincts as a filmmaker on him. Yeah, I actually had this one. I'm going to go ahead and smack it with the same rating as Paths of Glory and also give it 4.5 stars. Just a wonderful film. Really enjoyed it.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's, and look, dude, I mean, I gave you shit. Kurosawa has dozens of films. You know, I've maybe seen, I don't know, 5 or 6, right? So I still have a ton of Kurosawa that I need to see. Huge gaps in his career. Kind of the same way like with, you know, Herzog or any of these prolific filmmakers that just have, you know, multiple dozens of films. You just, there's no way you're going to be able to go through everything. And then also still entertain, you know, genre films and indie films. I mean, there's so much content out there. So I really appreciate, you know, much as you do, that with this program gives us a chance to check out some of these films that, again, you know, we wouldn't have made a priority to watch otherwise. Like even if you had decided to check out Kurosawa, there's no way you're going to check this out before you do Rashomon and before you do Seven Samurai and possibly Jimbo and some of these other movies, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's funny you brought up Scorsese, because I did read online somewhere that there's a rumor that he was attached to remake this film at one point. It got stuck in development hell. So that would have been interesting to actually get a Scorsese version of this film at some point, a remake. So
yeah, I mean, you know, it's kind of funny because so you have a Japanese filmmaker adapting a Western novel, and then a Western filmmaker who often adapts those same Western novels adapting the Eastern filmmaker's film from the Western novel.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so anyways, both of us really enjoyed both of these movies, but certainly High and Low. And we got a quick fake commercial break coming up. Stick around. We'll see you afterward.
Attention, ladies! Are you tired of those same old shoes that just last and last without fail?
I wish these ugly things would break already so I could get new ones.
Well, we've got fantastic news. In a striking and bizarre partnership, the National Shoe Company of Japan and the paramilitary division of the French Army have joined forces to inexplicably bring you the next great line of affordable shoe, Crapé.
Love those Crapé shoes.
You'll never again have to worry about your shoes overstaying their welcome, as the Crapé line is designed to wear out in just 6 months or less, keeping your pocketbook light while providing fresh chum to the capitalistic overlords of the industrial shoe complex with their boots on the neck of the common man.
Love those Crapé shoes.
With Crapé, expensive leather insoles are a thing of the past. Imagine how much money you'll save walking on pure, unrefined, economy-grade particle board.
It feels like I'm walking on, well, particle board? This is not pleasant.
But you look fantastic.
The balls of my feet are actively bleeding.
Lady, the only thing you're bleeding is savings.
Love those Crapé shoes.
And to take full advantage of significant economies of scale, Crapé is made available in just 3 colors. Black, for ladies of taste, white, for ladies of modesty, and red, for the communist scum that threatens to dilute the hardworking nature of free market enterprise.
As a red-blooded woman, I love the opportunity to save my hard-earned money, while also working to abolish the ill-directed ideological onslaught of the Marxist proletariat.
Love those Crapé shoes.
So buy yourself a pair of Crapé shoes today. Crapé shoes, because what are you, a socialist?
All right, Ryan, so this was a great week for films. 2 heavyweights, Kubrick, Kurosawa, 2 great films. Let's go ahead and before we get on to next episode's films, let's do our quick comparison feature. So what were some things that stuck out to you in terms of the nature of these 2 films and how they compared to one another?
I thought that they one ramped up or one ramped down. So, with Paths of Glory, you start in the trenches of World War I. You have a little bit of a pickup with the meetings of the generals, and then it quickly escalates and you're on the front lines and you're storming the anthill and all this shit. And then from there on out, it just kind of is a slow burn, to the shooting range where they end up meeting their ultimate fate. And then you end up, really kind of somber in the bar and all of that. And I feel like High and Low did the exact opposite, where you start in the house and it's like business dealings about shoes, exactly like what you were saying. Like, am I going to be in for this? And then by the end, you're all in for this. And it's Elijah Wood sunglasses, baby. Like, it's all in, and it's intense, and there's heroin zombies. And so, it was just a really contrasty pace. Like I was saying earlier, they both do kind of have a dirty tone. I felt like they played with a lot of textures in this film, both these films, to really get the set and setting down. I know you called me out on using gritty for both films, but it really did feel that way. That both these films kind of took you in the muck and mire. In High and Low is when, in the ghettos when they're chasing the kidnapper. They even went into detail about the fish guts that were sprayed on the car after they found the confiscated car, and like how they could track that back to the fisheries and so forth. And so I just thought that, they did a pretty cool job in a similar way that, like, noir classics like Chinatown or even The Big Sleep or some of these things had done, kind of putting you into it and taking you out of some of the glitz and glam and throwing you in the mud. I also thought, I mentioned this earlier very briefly, the relationships these directors must have had with the actors. As you said in Paths of Glory, Kirk Douglas actually championed that film quite a bit and got them to retain the original ending and stood up for him, and ended up being in Spartacus, the follow-up to this film by Kubrick, if I'm not mistaken. So, and then also Mifune and Kurosawa, like you said, also, they were in several films together. It just kind of, this was later in Kurosawa's career. This is after a lot of his, greatest hits that you could think of right off the top of your head. We're going, I think, past Seven Samurai was I want to say
Yeah, for
57,
sure.
56, something like that.
Mhm.
So, we're 6 years past that. He's been working with Mifune pretty much constantly, from what I understand, cranking out tons of films. So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting take too, just the acting, which again, is something we didn't maybe speak quite enough of because I thought both these films were very well acted.
Yeah, you can tell that we both approach cinema from a filmmaking perspective because we always end up talking about directorial choices and writing decisions and story arcs, and we really probably should lend a little bit more attention to some of the performances because some of them are really good in these films. Whether it's Klaus Kinski and Aguirre, whether it's Toshiro Mifune in High and Low, whether it's Kirk Douglas in Paths of Glory. But neither of us are actors, so I think we tend to focus on some of these other elements a little more.
Yeah. No, this was a very well acted, both these were very well acted films. And like I said, it was neat to see. I think Kurosawa's worked with several of those actors over and over again. I think that was just kind of a few of those actors were his homies.
Yeah, totally. So for my comparison, I think that these are two films that were both very classically made, and that they're two films that are both made richer for those classical filmmaking styles. So again, usually when we get a war movie, it's going to be a lot of bombast. It's going to be a lot of, patriotism. You're going to get, action scenes in the trenches, things like that. And Kubrick's version just took a much more dialogue driven, it's almost like the war equivalent of almost like a romantic comedy, just from the standpoint of the whole movie is pretty much just characters talking about stuff in rooms and exterior environments, right? It's not really about the action or the violence or anything like that, And then the same thing with the High and Low film. It was refreshing to see, because it was ultimately basically a police procedural is what High and Low was, but it was done in a unique way because it was done from somebody who doesn't come from that traditional school of visual language. And so he presented it to us in a completely different manner, much more classical filmmaking styles, wide shots, long takes, not a lot of fast edits, not a lot of movement, kind of the way when you watch those old films from the 40s and 50s and they have those really drawn out takes carried over from theater because film was so new at the time. So I enjoyed, so I enjoyed that about those films. And then the other thing is that both films dealt with violence. However, they dealt less with the act of violence and more about the emotional reaction to that violence. And we saw that in different ways.
Okay.
Yeah, so, again, doubling back to Paths of Glory, most films would be all about those battlefield shots and, Tom Berenger throwing up his arms as he gets shot in slow motion, the swelling music, and you're supposed to cry, but you just want to get the hell out of the theater because Oliver Stone, you're an overwrought hack sometimes.
Oh, man, this guy's coming out swinging.
But Kubrick's got confidence, and, he's not just on 2 pounds of blow at any given time, so he can actually make a mature film. And he did so here. And and so...
you don't know how much blow Kubrick did. Don't you make those comparisons.
He just doesn't seem like that kind of guy, man. I don't think anybody who makes 2001 is just busting rails left and right. Can't see that happening.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
But again, so, Paths of Glory was less about the violence itself, and it was more about the emotional reaction to that from the leaders that are trying to deflect and avoid any criticism for their decision making, to Dax responding to that and feeling, like he needs to defend these men and he's the only one on their corner. And then even the last shot that we talked about, with the soldiers with the girl, a very emotional scene there. And that sort of allowing that emotion to come out in response to war. That's ultimately what that scene was about. And so and then in High and Low we see how tortured Kingo is for most of the film, as well as his chauffeur. And the way that even after they get the kid back, the way that the chauffeur responds, everybody's just sort of in this constant state of turmoil. And I thought that it was a really interesting take for both films to take on their respective genres.
All right. Yeah. I like all that stuff, man. That's all good shit. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was a great week, dude. I was really excited about this week coming into it, and it really just matched all of my hopes. And I mean, again, dude, when you get Kurosawa and Kubrick in the same program, that's a hell of a program.
These are two heavy hitters. And I did wonder a little bit on because sometimes you hear about filmmakers inspiring one another and everybody's kind of watching each other's shit. Whoever's at the top of the heap is like seeing what everybody else is doing. And certain people are influenced by others or at least respect their work. And it really did make me wonder what these two directors thought about each other's films and what they would have said,
Yeah.
how they would have reviewed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't be surprised. We should
was
look into
Kurosawa a
that.
fan of Kubrick or vice versa? You know what I mean? Like, were some of these guys, kind of in a fraternity of sorts, like your Spielbergs and Lucases and Scorseses and all of that. So I don't know. That'd be interesting to find out.
That'd be really interesting to know. And I know both of them, I could very easily see them being the type of people that respect each other's work, even if they don't necessarily hang out and grab a beer after the shoot or anything like that. But they both seem like really private people. They have their sort of go-to, people that they work with. They tend to work in small crews for longer periods of time. I'm sure they appreciate and respect one another's process, but we should look into that.
Even one thing that really made this stand out to me was watching Paths of Glory and wondering, man, this Kubrick must have really been inspired by, David Lean. But then it occurred to me, this was at the exact same time that Lean was making Bridge on the River Kwai, and then he hadn't even gotten to make Lawrence of Arabia yet. So maybe Lean was inspired by Kubrick in a lot of ways. And I was like, man, I wonder if these cats all knew each other.
Yeah.
Ever hung out at awards shows for drinks afterwards or something, I don't know.
Or maybe there was someone else that we were and are unaware of that they were looking to, and they happened to be looking to the same people either at that time or growing up, and so they had those same influences,
right.
And there's just some crossover.
I got to do some research on this and get back to you. I'm very curious.
All right, man. Well, we are at one of my favorite parts of the program, and that's where we get to do our lottery drawing for our next two films. I'm really looking forward to it. And for anyone listening right now, our master list here is sitting at a nice svelte 153. So we go to our random.org true random number generator, and we are going to select our next two films. Ryan, film number 1. The number we have is 107. Oh, man. I think that you are going to be really, really pleased about this one. It's one you and I have talked about wanting to see for a while. I think we've even mentioned it on the program. We'll be watching Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Yes.
Was this Mario Van Peebles back in the day? A little blaxploitation film made for nothing.
You actually introduced me to this film. I had never heard of it, and you were like kind of one of the ones because you were like a little bit more familiar with the whole exploitation and blaxploitation in the 70s, and I hadn't really been into that, So
I think this is like the blaxploitation film. It's the OG of all of it. So
crazy.
I'm just kind of showing the view from the ghettos, showing film, from the ghetto's point of view. I think it'll be really interesting. So what else we got?
All right, dude. So for film number 2, we go here. We're going to go up to number 60. Oh, wow, dude. This is an interesting one. 2002's Hero out of China. Are you familiar with that one?
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's...
Dude, I've seen that movie a bazillion times.
Have you really?
Yeah, if we're talking about the same hero.
Yeah. What's the dude's name? I'm so bad with names. I always want to say Chun-Li, and that just sounds insensitive.
It's not Jet Li, is it?
It is Jet Li. I knew I was close. Yeah, so 2002, Jet Li, nameless protagonist, Chinese film.
I think Chris Doyle shot this.
Did he?
My man Chris Doyle. Yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, this was pretty revolutionary when this movie came out because the slow motion and the bright, vibrant colors and all of that. I know a lot of this has existed in Asian cinema for quite a while, but man, Chris Doyle, this Aussie guy, moves over and starts working with people like Wong Kar-wai and stuff like that, and he just goes bananas. And I think he, if I'm not mistaken, he shot Hero. Now I have to look it up because I'm going to look like an asshole if I'm wrong.
How long has it been since you've seen it, dude?
It's been a few years.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, well, I've never seen this one. Obviously, I put this one on the list. So we got one of yours and one of mine this
really
week, which is always
surprising
nice.
that you've never seen this.
Yeah, no, I know. Like I said, we all have gaps in our film knowledge, dude. Like, it's impossible. You haven't seen Kurosawa. I haven't seen Hero. You know, and there's two people going, what? To like both of those things, right?
It could be the same person.
So, yeah. And then, we also get the fun of comparing this, what looks to be a sort of very, grandiose operatic Chinese film from 2002 versus a gritty 1970s blaxploitation film in Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. So we get to compare those two films on our next full episode. That's going to be a lot of fun. And on that note, Ryan, we also have to announce the half-episode for next week. So in order for our listeners to be able to watch the films before the episodes launch, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we clearly communicate those, because there's been a couple of the half-episodes that we haven't been launching ahead of time. Two of our four listeners have asked and said, hey, what's the deal? So we're going to announce those alongside the two films that we randomly draw at the end of every episode. So the half-episode for this week is, drum roll please, The Lighthouse by one Mr. Robert Eggers. And
shit. Okay.
Yeah. I actually haven't seen The Witch. I don't know if you saw that one. Did you?
I did. I had some problems with that movie. The really thick accents that he gave all his talent, the Cockney accents, I guess they would be your colonial style Pilgrim accents, whatever accents Pilgrims have. I could not cut through it with a knife. It was very, very difficult for me with all their old jargon and slang and old crotchety gold digger slangs and things. It was too old-timey. I couldn't get into it. Had a cool ending, but man, it was a long, dry ride.
Yeah,
so we'll see if this
that was
is
only
different.
90 minutes long.
I love
too,
Willem
that film.
Dafoe. Yeah, it felt pretty long. I know a lot of people love that movie, so I'll probably catch some hell for not liking The Witch. But
That's cool. Like I said, we all have our cinematic confessions.
Yes, so I'm looking forward to Lighthouse. Like I said, Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson going banana crazy. I'm all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just to reiterate for your listeners, our next episode is going to be in 2 weeks. That's going to be a half-episode featuring The Lighthouse. And then 2 weeks after that, we're going to return with a full episode where we look at Hero and Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. It's been a lot of fun hanging out with you guys today. Do want to plug the socials real quick before we go. Again, as much as Ryan and I sit here and love to hear the sound of our own voice drone on for hours and hours at a time, we would love to hear from you guys even more. We talk all the time amongst ourselves and here with you, and we'd love to hear from you about what kind of films you're into right now, what you think of our films, if you watched them, did you like them, did you not, what do you think of our opinions, what do you think of our voice. Maybe there's a chance that you just had an exceptional muffin and you really want to tell someone about it. Whatever the reason, you can reach out to us. And we have Twitter, which is at Esoterica Cinema. And if you don't want to be constrained by 280 characters, you can always send us an email. That's going to be esotericacinema@gmail.com. Hit us up. Tell us about that movie. Tell us about that muffin. Whatever it is, we want to hear from you. And like I said, come back and join us in a couple weeks for The Lighthouse. Until then, Ryan, it has been an exceptional time with you today. And
thanks for having me, buddy.
Thanks to everyone for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.
From the visionary minds at Aberrant Literature comes a short fiction collection unlike any other, Aberrant Tales, bursting at the seams with stories of creativity, excitement, and wonder. Aberrant Tales takes the very best in modern science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and weaves them into one thrilling, eclectic package. Featuring the works of Ashton Macaulay, M.T. Roberts, Daniel Kurland, and Jason Peters. Aberrant Tales is available today in ebook, hardcover, and paperback versions, online and everywhere books are sold. Published by Aberrant Literature.